Welcome to the Hawks Nest stream show. My name is Brandon Kane, and on this wonderful Friday, right on the precipice of a weekend, you tuning on in here and checking out the show again here as we get through our week and we get through this off season. Well, the Mariners in first place, get you guys a little satiated on the sports front. We still do have our Hawks going on in the background here and a lot to really talk about, a lot of exciting things to really talk about. And one of the more kind of fun parts of this team to look at and interesting parts to track is the defense that Mike McDonald is putting together. The Seattle Seahawks took a left turn a couple of years ago versus other teams in the NFL that are so heartily in on looking to go get an offensive coach to lead them through, that it's got to be done by an offensive coach. That's how you got to get to the Super Bowl, where Seahawks did take that left turn and said, look, we are going to go the other way. We're zigging when you're all zagging. We're going to go look for that coach who's going to actually be a defensive-minded coach and a kind of mastermind type, a genius mind type. I mean, I'm not trying to throw these titles on top of him, but that's what you were shooting for. Well, we'll see if we'll get that here with McDonald in there. It was a good first season. And so it's fun to watch how he is looking to push this ball forward defensively with his schematics and with how he uses players. And I think one thing in trying to kind of study and understand Mike McDonald for the last year and seeing what direction he not only is in right now, where he's been, but maybe where he's looking to go. I think what he's really trying to do is, confusion is a big part of it, the forefront of his defense, definitely, but also the ability to have multiple players who can do a variety of things on the football field. And so they're not as much housed in a positional brand of football, that you have guys aligned in a variety of different places that can do so many things in their skill set that then you can make it that much harder on offenses because they cannot designate what player is what prior to the snap, which is, of course, a big part of what offenses do. Talked a lot about last year bringing in two guys in Baker and Dodson, and it didn't really work, but you brought two guys in that both can play the wheel and the mic. And as you know, a lot of times with the quarterbacks prior to the snap, one of the first things they're looking to do is identify the mic. Well, if the mics could be flipping prior to post-snap, then it gets harder to identify that guy. I think this works similarly when you go from defensive fronts to linebackers to safeties and how that alignment's being set up. And so I think the confusion point is the important part here at the front of this. And why I bring that up is that we bring in two different players that are purified kind of fits for what McDonald wants to do in this vein. And that is, of course, Devon Witherspoon and Nick Emmanwori. Emari gets drafted in the second round here in this last draft, and many people are saying, okay, well, now he's definitely going to go take the Kyle Hamilton role. He's built somewhat similarly to Kyle Hamilton. He's faster than a Kyle Hamilton. And they go, okay, well, it's a natural that this guy's going to slide into this position in Mike McDonald's defense. And it got me to thinking, looking into this a little bit. Is there really a Kyle Hamilton role within the defense? And what Mike McDonald is seeking, that he's got this archetype of a player that he wants to put in there? Because look, Michigan didn't have a Kyle Hamilton guy really playing that role. I think what really happened is, I look through on the tape of this, and we'll show a few snaps on this, but I think what really, as much as anything, happened there with Baltimore and moving Kyle Hamilton essentially away from just being a safety, and really what he was doing more of, I'll play slot and I'll play some base situations where I'm a linebacker. Like I'm a Sam linebacker over here as a third guy that they can kind of add on here. Roquan, Patrick Queen, I'll be the other guy in here when we get down in base situations. I think it was obviously to get the most out of Kyle Hamilton, and a guy that brings so many different skills to play and bear, but it was also a little bit about the fact that they didn't have as really great a slot cornerback in place. They didn't have that solidified. So there was room for a guy like him who could play the slot really well to then slide out of safety at times and move into that role. The other part of it was that they had, especially in 2023, they had the three safeties there on the roster, and that they had signed Marcus Williams from the Saints. They had Geno Stone there, so they could keep those two guys in kind of safety look situations and then afford to be able to move Kyle Hamilton down into the slot at times and kind of have him moving between each side of it. So when we get into, looking at a little bit of the tape on this, I want to show you guys with him on how that rolled. Bring this up here for you. Oh, not that one. Not that one. Here we go. Nope, not that one either. Where'd it go? Oh, I lost it. Okay. Sorry, guys. 1 second here. Uno momento. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of snaps here with Kyle Hamilton to kind of get this across, because this is such a kind of a narrative I see out there suited where, you're you're looking for this role in your defense. And I don't think we're exactly looking for this role in the defense. And I think Devin Witherspoon's basically presence on this team is not going to make this as much of a necessity for Nick Emmanwori. But here you've got him here in basically a box safety kind of look here. They would use Kyle Hamilton in these kind of roles, drifts out into cover 2 post snap. You can see that here. So this is a little bit of the traditional way you would see safeties, strong safeties aligned here. Again, Kyle Hamilton at the top of your screen, down in around the box. This is kind of like how we used in sort of the Cam Chancellor days, right? You can do a variety of different things. So we can slide down here into the box, pick up a guy easily, right in coverage, get him locked up in completion on the play. Nicely done on his part. But this is stuff that we've seen in Seattle going back to Cam quite a bit. You end up on usually a tight end or a running back out of the backfield out of this alignment. And this is how you used to use strong safeties. Of course, in the modern era now, we've seen more of a drive here to go and more of a drive here as you're going to see him. Let me get you marked here for you. He's going to be at the top of your screen here. Again, kind of down in the box, just sort of drifting, then picking his guy up in coverage. So there's going to be a lot of this is what you're going to do with Emmanwori. I don't know if it's even the first year you're going to do a ton of this with him. I don't think that was actually, I got the wrong guy, I think there. My bad, guys. I marked the wrong guy. He's actually at the bottom of the screen, excuse me. Still in the box, though. Still not up. You got the single high situation here. We've got 2 wide receiver looks. So you got two receivers or 2 safeties. You got him down here kind of lingering around for the tight end a little bit here. Just want to kind of get across a little bit here. Picks up the tight end back in coverage pretty seamlessly here. So he's the outside guy. A lot of the confusion you create in this defense as well. If you're Patrick Mahomes and you're trying to figure out, if you look just at the bottom side, you have a 2 stack of receivers and you have 3 defenders, technically three receivers because you have the tight end that's a little bit on ball there, the inline guy, and then Kelsey off ball is kind of a receiver there. So you have 3 for 3, but who's picking up who? Because oftentimes you're going to go inside, outside with this, which is kind of how they play this, but they sort of disguise it a little bit, and it's a lot of confusion. This is one of the hard parts about Mike McDonald's defense, where you see Mahomes' eyes wants to go to the left. He wants to attack those receivers to that side, but he can't quite figure out who's picking up who. You've got 4 Raven bodies in here, and it's not clear who's going to grab who, and he ends up just looking away and scrambling over to the other side. So you get him in box look safety stuff. You get a lot of Hamilton at times as a pure slot cornerback at times in the Ravens defense as well. So here he is as a slot. You've got your 2 wide receiver look here essentially. They've got a tight end, they got their fullback use check, and a running back here. So a little bit of an odd kind of look from the Niners and what they bring. I want to show a lot of Niner snaps because I think this will inform us a little bit about how Emmanwori is going to be used in this defense. And so he's essentially the slot defender here to Brandon Ayuk underneath. I mean, he's the other cornerback's going to stay to the other side of the formation. Kind of a zone look is what you'd expect from this, and that's just what they get. And you can see you cause an interception on the play because Brock Purdy gets kind of confused about what they're doing here. Just closing down the holes. One of the things I talk about with the Niners and playing Purdy is that you want to sit on the short routes. You want to have your coverages set up to where you squeeze Purdy and you force him to push that ball down the football field. Well, look at how short these routes are sitting. It's obviously right in front of the sticks, but you're squeezing those routes down really nicely. That's kind of just a side on this. I'm going to have a little bit of extra details about the defense we see from this and what they're doing. Again, you got him in the slot here. Right lined up. He's over the top of Kyle Juszczyk here. I believe that's who they got right there. Sometimes it's hard to tell on who they got lined there. But again, this is the part where people will go, okay, the Hamilton role in the defense. So he's going to play the slot. And so you're going to move Witherspoon then to the outside. I'm not as sure. Great play here by Hamilton. Oh, he missed the tackle. He comes back in and makes the tackle, so he at least slows the guy down. But peels off the slot, just playing zone coverage, great instincts. So there's a lot of this with him in the slot. Again here, in the slot there, kind of bottom side of your screen a little bit. Aligned in the area there. Very capable of doing this. There's very few safeties in this league that can kind of line up in that way and just kind of lock a guy down, a wide receiver especially. Not a tight end, not a running back, but actually, in this case, Deebo Samuel just completely shut him down on the route. This is the part where I'm going to wonder about if we're really going to put Emari in these kind of situations or if we're going to stay with Devon Witherspoon, because Witherspoon does it so very well. But this is a big part of what you've got the Ravens doing with Hamilton, is having him in that slot role where you have two other safeties on the field, and then he's essentially your third cornerback on the field. So you get kind of the idea here. I don't think I've got to belabor a lot of this. Here's the blitz with him, not the blitz, but him off Roquan Smith blitzes, I'm sorry. I think I marked again the wrong guy. My bad, guys. It's Friday. So he's going to be top of your screen here. A little bit of a zone, play the first route, and then pick up the running back out of the backfield. What's nice about this is that you get a guy like this in the slot and you get the tackling ability, which is what the Ravens really, I'm sure, like about what he brings out there from the slot. But this is also the reason why I'm not as sure that you're going to do this as much with Witherspoon, because a big centerpiece of Witherspoon's game is his ability to tackle, get off blocks, bring guys down the second that they make the catch. Whereas with the Ravens, I think there was a little bit more of a need here to get him into the slot in this way. So you kind of get the idea here. Again, you got him in the slot there to the top of the screen slot, picks up another receiver, helps in on the tackle. So a lot of slot snaps with him. I don't think, in my opinion, that this is what you're going to be doing with Emmanwori very much. There's a chance that you could be doing it on tight end-based matchups where you've got a difficult tight end that you have to deal with, and so you're going to move him into the slot for those snaps against that tight end. But going through and just reevaluating through the tape on the Ravens and how they used Hamilton in 23 especially, they were not really using him as a tight end stepper. He was all over the place. You use him as a blitzer, you use him in coverage, you drop him in zone. He's not really just manning up on the tight end, and that's what you're asking him to do. The defense doesn't really work that way. It's more, the parts and pieces are more interconnected. You're not just simply matching up against guys and then running. You've got everything is kind of all together on a string a little bit. One more snap here with him in the slot, just again so you can kind of see. I don't think this is what you're doing with him. What I do think you're going to do with him is a lot more of this type of stuff at times. So against Detroit, we've got so against Detroit here, you've got 4 wide receivers. And so if you could picture this, if we're just trying to extrapolate it to Seattle, you'd have Devin Witherspoon right here. He's in on the slot. Okay. Now we've got Kyle Hamilton back here in a cover 2 shell look. And then we've got over here 2 Lion wide receivers, essentially. I mean, it's the tight end, Laporta right there on the inside of the slot, and then you have the wide receiver on the outside. So what you have here is Laporta uncovered, right? Laporta right here uncovered. There's nobody in front of him. He's got a free release. You then have Kyle Hamilton aligned 10 yards back with a cover 2 shell to pick up that receiver coming off the blocks. This is also a lot of what Nick Emmanwori did out there at South Carolina. And it really stood out, this one real ability to be able to pick up receivers who have a little bit of a build-up speed to you and just neutralize them in place. This is a sack. This was, I think, looking to be kind of set up to be a tunnel screen sort of, but Ravens this was a tough day for the Lions. Just tough day for them. But there's a lot of this with him on tape of being able to pick up guys at South Carolina. It's a hell of a skill set because there's few safeties that can allow a slot to essentially have build-up speed to get up into them, and then you're able to pick them up off the stem of the route. So same thing here against Detroit, where, again, you have more of a 3-receiver set than a 4-receiver set here, but rather than having your slot on the field now, they don't, well, the slot's there, but it's 4 wide receivers, sorry. But so you got the slot here, boom, boom. He's up against the inside slot there. But then again, we've got a guy uncovered here between the slot and the outside wide receiver. And then you have Hamilton right here. So 10 yards uncovered. You'd still have Witherspoon on the field as your slot corner in these situations. But I think you're going to get a lot of these kind of looks for them where they're going to kind of challenge offenses to identify it. And you can see with Goff, he goes right to it, but the coverage gets locked down. So if you look at Goff's eyes, Goff opens his shoulders right up to that side there. He's looking right at Hamilton. He wants to attack. He sees that as being a mismatch. But when you have a really quick, good cover guy then from the safety position, this is actually not it's not going to be something that you can pick on with him. He's going to be able to very fluidly pick this kind of stuff up. And I can't undersell, this is not a skill set that a lot of safeties have. Even in the case of Hamilton here, he's got to kind of just get in his way and cause a little bit of a collision there to sort of stop the momentum. He does it kind of creatively here, where I think Emmanwori's got sometimes the wheels to just run with the guy, especially coming out of the stem. Emmanwori was so good with coming off the stem of the route and be able to pick those guys up there. Again, here, same kind of situation. A little bit of the high side of your screen now. So you're going to have Hamilton here, off coverage, cover 2 shell again. We got our guy right here in the slot, 4 wide receiver sets. So again, we have this being a position where you'd have it Witherspoon on the field. Witherspoon would be down here to the bottom side. But again, you can see that this is a tough draw for the safety. I've got 10 yards between me and the wide receiver. So that's 10 yards of build-up speed to get to the top of the stem of the route, where I've got to react to that stem and be able to predict it or move with the guy fluidly enough so he doesn't open up. Again, goes right after him here. You can see Goff tries to attack it because this quarterback's going to recognize this is a mismatch. You have my guy uncovered. He's going to get a free release. And then you're in a real pickle there, being 10 yards that you've got to just kind of stand in place and wait for him to get to you and then hope that you can predict the break. Hopefully you can move with the break. And here Hamilton does seamlessly, of course. Not a good throw by Goff, but I don't think Goff saw it as being particularly open when he threw this ball either. I think he thought there was going to be a little bit more separation here. These are the kind of routes I think you bring him in on and let him work with at times. Some of this is going to be mixing and matching, I think, Kobe Bryant too, and how you want to roll that. Some of this could be dependent upon how much a team wants to run the ball and the threat of that. And if you want maybe an Emari out there for what he brings as a run defender and helping you there. But another snap here where you have him aligned, off coverage, sub cover 2 shell. This is almost kind of a box situation, but again, is going to pick up that player. This is Emmanwori's game to a T. He can do this type of stuff all day long. Kind of drops it. They make it look like he's going to cover the slot here, but they drop it into cover 2 shell post snap, basically. Oh, the middle of the other safety's going middle of the field. It always looks a little unusual with McDonald. It never looks kind of purely on the coverages with him, I've noticed. Just one more snap here I want to show on this. Kind of drive home the point again. So got Hamilton again there. Down, covered up over this receiver, essentially. This is how the quarterback's going to read it. A lot of QBs will look at this as a mismatch. But with a guy like Hamilton, with a guy like Emmanwori, it's not going to be a mismatch running him like that. Again, drops back into cover 2 and kind of confuses Mahomes a little bit on this. See, again, Mahomes looking right to that side. Look at his eyes. He's looking right to where Hamilton's at. But he thinks Hamilton's going to be covering the receiver, I think, and that then his true slot's going to get an opening deep. That guy running the seam route there is going to get open deep, he thinks, but then he comes to see that Hamilton actually is just going to push it into cover 2 post-snap. And then Hamilton does a good job of picking the receiver up. Even though he's in cover 2 here, he recognizes, I got nobody else here. I just go and get this guy to the middle of the field. I think that's the main way they're going to look to use him. There's obviously, I think, going to be some 3 safety looks built in too as well with Nick Emmanwori on in there. But when you look at, we're looking at Witherspoon last year in this role, the part of this is that I just don't feel like you're going to have to really bump Witherspoon out of the role here because he's just so good at what he does within that. And that, you can have him like here where you have Devin Witherspoon literally playing like a linebacker down around the line of scrimmage. You've got him here, right there on the line as your slot here. But there's a lot of plays from last year where you get to see Witherspoon just come in and make a play like a linebacker here. Completely, the block is missed because he's just too quick to the spot, comes up, wraps the guy up, game over. I think if you're going to look to move your slot out of the field at this point, you're either worrying about, the main thing you'd be worrying about in wanting to flip out an Emmanwori for Witherspoon would be, I worry about the tackling, but you don't worry about that with Witherspoon. I think this is going to keep him into this role and that you're not going to look to slide him out of that role because of it. There's snap here with him as a linebacker against the Patriots. Look, you got him down here essentially as your third linebacker. Tyrese Knight, Dotson, and then you got him right there to the right. He's the slot guy over number 3 here. Yeah, he is. But he's also here playing this like a linebacker would play the run here. He's not trying to get caught up in his coverage responsibilities. Like you just saw in the last snap, he's too quick. Gets ahead of the cornerback who can't lay the block right there. Can't get the block laid because he's too reactive and too quick to the spot. Gets in the backfield, makes the tackle. So you don't have to really cover this up for Witherspoon, which I think is going to remove the need to get Emmanwori out on the field into that role like a Hamilton was, because Hamilton played so often out of the slot. And I just don't think that you're exactly going to be looking to move him into that kind of place. The other part of this with Witherspoon is that hasn't quite always looked as comfortable to the outside at times here in Seattle. He's at times looked like not a far better player, but just a better player from the slot than he is as an outside corner. There's some good snaps you can find with an outside corner, but there's some snaps like this as well, where this is Robinson taking the top off. This isn't a number one guy for them. Just, it's good, great throw there by Garoppolo, put it in there. He's not bad coverage, but he gave up his share of completions at times when he's been aligned on the outside through his first 2 years. First, when you line him up otherwise. Now, there are some moments I do think that they're going to utilize at times, I think, Witherspoon to the outside, but I think that that's mainly then going to be in base situations like this here. And then what you're going to do is you would rock 3 safety looks last year. You have Love here, Bryant here, and then you've got Rayshon Jenkins right here. So think about flopping Rayshon Jenkins out here for then Nick Emmanwori. And that's going to be the flip that you do. And then you're in base, so you'll have then Witherspoon to the outside. And now here's where you can bump up the tackling, where now you flop out a guy on the outside at the cornerback position who's maybe not as good a tackler. And then you get plays like this from Witherspoon, where he'll easily fight off the block of the cornerback or of the receiver and then come in and make the tackle. So this is a way to maybe bump up the running game at times and flipping out that role here and there a little bit. This play is very similar here against the Rams. Same kind of situation. He first plays his coverage responsibility. Does Witherspoon, bottom of your screen here. So he handles his first coverage responsibility, then peels off it and comes up and makes the tackle on the guy that was not his responsibility in coverage-wise. Just keeping everything in front of you. Comes up and makes the tackle. So this is where there could be some opening to moving Witherspoon to the outside a little bit. But I think that they're just going to mix that in here and there. I don't think it's going to be that he suddenly now goes to the outside almost full time, and you're going to see Emari now just operating from the Kyle Hamilton role within the slot mainly. I don't think that that's going to be the way that this thing goes. There'll be a little bit of it at times. I was surprised last year in kind of looking at some of the numbers on this, where Seattle did at times play a little bit of Witherspoon out there in the safety position. So here you got, look at that, Witherspoon out there as a cover 2 shell safety, huh? 3 safety looks here on the field. Bryant, Love here, over to the side. Then with motion, he's going to come back down in the slot. Think about how hard this makes it for quarterbacks trying to figure out what you're doing. Wait, the quarterback's going to safety? Wait, the other safety is coming down over here on this side? And of course, you can do this with Love here because Love's got familiarity with playing slot and being a slot corner. We come back to that point that I started with at the top of the show, being that what I think Mike McDonald is trying to do is not make his defense positionless, but that he has a lot of defenders that can do a wild amount of things. And that for a quarterback that likes to try to think about players, playing into more of that box kind of role, not box safety, but you're boxed into a role of what you bring to the table, that now you're able to just completely create confusion across the board. Bubble screen comes up, makes the tackle. We know Witherspoon can do that type of stuff. So I think I kind of show you, you can see with Witherspoon that he's well suited here with what he's doing from the slot. He's obviously a pretty good cover man from the slot. He had a little bit of a backward step last year as far as the number of completions he gave up and some of the yards he gave up. I think some of that was Mike McDonald trying to learn how to use him best. Again, you have a situation here where you're in a base defense. You've got him down there like a linebacker in the box. This is part of what makes Witherspoon such a great player, is there are a few slot corners that are going to play this like this. I've shown a few of these snaps, just how violent, tenacious, aggressive he is and how he plays it. If you didn't have this from the slot, I think there'd be more of a draw to try to go get Emari in there. But this guy provides this, so I don't think you're going to want to remove him out of that role myself. Just one more here showing how Witherspoon gets off blocks. Deebo Samuel tries to get down on him and lay a real weak block here. And he just gets right off of it. Here's Deebo there. There's Witherspoon there to the left-hand side of your screen. Watch you just kind of how easy he does this. Just takes this guy away, gets in and makes the tackle. We're going to be doing a show on Witherspoon here this offseason at some point, how underrated he is. But you guys get the point with that, I think, so I won't belabor it. in that he can do this stuff. You don't have to move him off the field. There's going to be some mixing and matching with Hamilton and Witherspoon in this role just a little bit, but you're certainly not just now moving Witherspoon back out to the outside. And to give you guys a little bit of an idea on this one, with Witherspoon, and as far as how he tackles at least, when we look here at his grades and what he did last year here for your Seahawks, 76 grade overall, coming off an 84 grade last year. Like I said, there was a little bit of a, there was a tiny bit of a factor here when it comes to him maybe going a little bit backwards as far as coverage-wise goes. Let's get a little bit deeper in on this. Felt like some of his play was improved once you started to get the linebacker core kind of figured out midway through the year. But you can see, especially with the tackling numbers with him, run defense, 90 grade last year, which was actually an improvement over his rookie year. The tackling numbers, there are some missed tackles there with him on tape, but overall, I don't think that that's really an issue for him, in my opinion. Again, I think some of that was improved once you got the linebacker play improved and you could have your inside linebackers actually making the tackles and not relying on your slot cornerbacks to make the tackles in the run game. But he is a good tackler. He can do that. He had a very solid season last year. He's like a top 15 graded cornerback by PFF last year in this role and how he played 1,000 snaps, as you can see there. And then when you go over and you take a look at let me get to some of the other stats I want to show you on this was an advanced stat. And NFL's come up with these really cool stats showing you some more advanced things that you could not typically get your hands on in prior years. And this stuff is able to kind of show you a little bit more. You get a little bit deeper into some of the data on this. And the one point of data I want to get into on looking at the slot and whether or not we need to be improved in the slot position, if we need that to be brought by Emari, where it's kind of like a failing group and you need him here. So what I want to look at is the EPA, expected points added. It's a metric that measures the impact of a play on a team's likelihood of scoring. It essentially quantifies how much a team's expected points change due to the outcome of a specific play. So you have a lot of times where you might see a basic stat with his like yards per game here. And that doesn't really tell you the whole story of how the yards happened. Was there extra plays? Was there bad offense? There's just, you're looking for some extra things that can be brought into play a little bit to try to better identify the success or failure of your unit with these EPAs. So EPA, you've got it here with per play. You've got EPA pass. You've got EPA rush. You're able to kind of see that. And what's nice here is that with this NFL stats, they've advanced this along to where I can go and look at this by a variety of different parameters. And so you can go base defense, nickel defense, dime defense, but I want to go to nickel personnel essentially here. And when you first look at the nickel personnel, you might see that at 282 yards a game. So here we go. So we've got Rams, best team in the league at only 142 yards a game that they're allowing when they're in nickel personnel. And you can see with the Seahawks actually on this, where they land is that they land a little bit deeper on this at 19th. So you think, well, maybe there's a bit of a coverage, potentially issue there. But then we kind of get, I think, into a little bit more of the understanding of, well, just because you're giving up yardage on the nickel personnel doesn't mean it's Witherspoon giving up that, right? So if we go to pass defense here as a marker on this, and we go back down and we look for slot target. You guys can see this here. Yeah, you guys can see this. And now we go back over to the EPA on this, and we get more of it's not on, passing yardage. If I just go totally that's more of a volume stat, right? This is more about now the efficiency part of the stat goes. And so being on the plus side, not good. You want to be on the negative side. You want to be that's where you want to be at there. And what we come to find, you've got your Seahawks on pass plays to the slot. This is when the slot is targeted. You've got Seattle fourth over there. So there's a little bit of a volume thing that's going on with Witherspoon when you look at, how many yards he gave up in the slot last year. Some of that had to do with a little bit of for instance, the offense's inefficiency, sometimes the defense finding its footing under McDonald in the first year. But I've already shown that Witherspoon was a really good tackler and that he can be like a linebacker for you from the slot in that role already with that. But you can see here with these numbers on the efficiency in the EPA that when it comes to your slot being targeted, you had the fourth best numbers as far as EPA of any team in the NFL at that point. And I think that these are the kind of numbers to me that should reinforce for Mike McDonald that I probably want to try to keep Witherspoon into that role, that's probably where he's going to be best suited when it's all said and done. And then I can, move Emmanwori in and around to here and there at times to be able to fit into the role here and there, depending on matchups. But like I said as well, going back and looking through the Ravens tape, they're not really a team that if you have a great tight end, they're going to stick you on that tight. They're going to stick their Hamilton or Emari on that tight end. And if the tight end's the slot receiver on a play, then your safety is going to be the slot receiver on the play. Doesn't really work that way with this defense. And we come back to why? Because McDonald wants to create confusion. It goes against what he wants to do from a defensive philosophy standpoint. Because if I'm having a guy travel with one guy, if I'm having a tight end that I'm trying to isolate with my safety, I'm leaving my scheme in order to try to get that matchup rolled. And I'm then removing a lot of the moving parts and some of the disguising I'm trying to do within my scheme when I set out to kind of do that way. So when it comes down to it, I think Emmanwori this first year, especially with Kobe Bryant's presence on this team, is going to fit to more of a role than he's going to fit to just being completely the Kyle Hamilton guy here. And what I mean by that role is I think that dime packages, you will see him as your fourth cornerback on the football field. That'll be the first place that you see him by and large. I think when you get down into goal line situations, there's a really good chance at that point that you're moving a guy like maybe Kobe Bryant off the field to move him onto the field, get a little bit bigger, get a little bit better as far as tackling goes down inside that place of things. So that's another spot that I think he'll show up at times. I think that there is some movement that you'll do a little bit with Kobe Bryant and with Emmanwori in and off the field here and there a little bit, but let's not forget that Kobe Bryant had basically a top 20 season for you from the safety position last year. He can be at times a bit of a ball hawk, and if he comes out there this year in a contract year and he's balling out, there may not be as much opening for Nick Emmanwori to then get back out in the field, and he's going to have to maybe kind of wait his turn a little bit on this one, which I know people are going to be impatient to want to go see him out there on that field. But there's going to be a role here for him. So beyond just the dime packages, behind the goal line looks, we're going to be doing a show looking a little bit at some of the three safety looks that Seahawks were unleashing last year, and that McDonald was even unleashing back at his time with Baltimore. So he's been kind of workshopping this one for a couple of years. And so there's the other place that you could see them go. Do you pull one less linebacker on the field to go three safeties? Do you pull one defensive lineman off the field to go three safeties? It's coming back to, again, the confusion and to being a guy in Mike McDonald that's a forerunner here in what he's trying to run defensively wise. He's not trying to lean back on old schematics from 20 years ago. He's trying to find the ways to push this ball forward and modernize this thing and continue to be at the cutting edge defensively. And hopefully we get the benefits on the back of this. I love it. It makes it exciting, especially coming from the prior scheme, which was so very, here's what we're going to run every time. Here's what we're going to run every time. What you see is what you're going to get. And now we find ourselves completely in the opposite place here with McDonald. And the more that you can confuse offenses, I think, the better the results for a defense. I think a big part of the defense is taking the bit of the measure back now as far as from the offenses over the past 2 years, where we've seen scoring going down and offensive success going down. A big part of that is because defenses have really started to embrace the confusion aspect. And this is what offenses have been doing for 20 years in the sport with the pre-snap motion, post-snap motion, misdirection, all that stuff. Is the confusion's been at the forefront of how they've run it. A lot of defenses in prior years have really not kind of ignored confusion, kind of ignored any part of that. We did with Carroll for a lot of years. Like I said, what you saw is what you were going to get. And that's a big time advantage that you don't want to just leave on the table just for the hell of it. You got to use all the advantages on the table you possibly can. And that's something that Mike McDonald loves to do. I really do like as well, though, this thinking that he is moving here bit by bit in having these positions be able to just be seamless between each other. Is there a Mike? Is there a Will? Or do we see in Tyrese Knight and Ernest Jones kind of moving back and forth between that role at times in games? A Byron Murphy, as much as it's been frustrating to see him stuck in there at nose tackle, is this a little bit of McDonald saying, the sport's moving away from now the big, trash can in the middle of the football field that can be immovable at the nose tackle position. And now we're going to go to more of kind of having these guys that are kind of both three tech light from the defensive tackle position. I'm not sure it's going that way. I'm just wondering if Mike McDonald's wondering about some of this stuff. And likewise, when it comes to the safety position, a guy that's embraced the cover two shell, that's embraced free safeties doing strong safety stuff, strong safeties doing free safety stuff, is he now going to fully embrace this in a way where now you see slots become safety post snap, Safeties become slots post-snap, and then think about how this all interworks together. You don't know who the Mike or the Will linebacker is. You don't know if the safety is going to end up around the slot. You don't know if the slot's going to end up back at safety. And a quarterback's got to make all of this determination prior to the snap, because post-snap, everything happens in the blink of the eye. You don't have time to figure it out. That's why it's so important for quarterbacks to be able to isolate and figure out what they're seeing prior to the snap so they have better success post-snap in their decision-making. You remove that from them, and now they're just reacting in the moment, and that's how mistakes get made. That's how you can go to start to build a dominant defense in the NFL. It'll be really fun to see how this does play out and the way that they're going to try to roll this pairing between Emari and Witherspoon, and if there's going to be some of him in that slot. I really think it's going to be more into the role in the first year, and then they're just going to build upon that, where Kobe probably leaves after this year, and then you just move Emari more to that strong safety role. Doesn't mean you're going to not still use him all over the place and he isn't a weapon. Just that he's not going to really be playing purely that Kyle Hamilton role. And that's more speaking to not the inadequacies of Nick Emmanwori. It speaks to how great a player Devin Witherspoon is. I think he's really underrated, not only still even within this fan base, but absolutely still nationally, where if you talk to coaches around this league, they know who Devin Witherspoon is. Brian Branch might have a lot of claim to fame out there in Detroit for what he brings that's similar in what Witherspoon does. I think there's a lot of coaches in this league that would tell you, I'll take Witherspoon over Brian Branch. I think he's a better player. I know that might not be the consensus from the narrative of general terms in the fandom out there, NFL fandom-wise, but I do believe that that's where coaches would stand on him, and he's earned that as he's been a hell of a player. Going back and watching his tape again, Witherspoon is just so good, and he plays at such a level of aggression that's so unique versus the other guys on the defense. He's just playing at a different speed than everybody else. But Emari will help. He's going to have a role. You're going to be able to kind of slowly slide him in rather than just throwing them into the fire right from the jump and making him do everything. He can kind of concentrate on a specified role, master that role this year perhaps, and then just get even better as we move on into the future. You guys let me know, though. Do you think he is going to slide in that spot? Do you think they're going to try to move Witherspoon back to the outside where he hasn't always been as comfortable? It is a way where, especially when you have maybe a Job and a Woolen on the outside, you could improve a little bit of your outside corner tackling ability and run defending ability by putting him out there, but he's just so good in the slot and what he does there. It's just hard to do that when a guy's been so effective in the role you've had him there doing. Be an interesting conundrum. It's a good problem to have. We call these first world problems out here in Seattle, having too many good guys for the slot position, but it will be fun to see how this goes. You guys let me know, though. You guys let me know and see where it goes. I want to do a little interaction here with you guys today on the chat, and then we're going to bump this on through into the weekend. We got alignment of shows set up for you next week. We're going to start off with UDFAs and taking a look at a couple of just specific guys on the UDFA front. We got Zy Alexander out of LSU, Jared Ivey, my favorite undrafted rookie free agent that the Seahawks got this after the draft. A guy I liked a lot, actually, looking at him and scouting him coming out. And then we're going to look at a little J.R. Singleton, kid of Iowa State, who might be an answer for us over at the nose tackle position. We're just going to have to see when it comes to that. But, we'll see. We'll see there. Mr. Kane in the house. How you doing, man? Space. Good to see you, bro. Good to see you, man. Catalyst, so do we have an idea for incorporating Nicky into the space defense? Yeah, I think it's the main ways I see being brought up here are going to be dime packages. He's your fourth cornerback. Goal line, you're probably flopping out Kobe Bryant for him. 3 safety looks. Don't undersell this fact that Mike McDonald might be leaning more into the 3 safety looks than ever before, with having 3 real capable guys back there that can do it. And in Emari, he's got a guy that's almost like linebacker size build that he can play out there as a safety who can then come up and be a really good run defender as well at his size with his length. So I think that it's those 3 main roles initially you're going to move him into, and that there's a good amount of snaps to be had there. I mean, he can probably find, a third of the defensive snaps every game just in that kind of role alone, I would say. But I don't think you're going to just see him out there 24/7 run as a starter, and he's going to be eating up 85% of the snaps. And mainly that's just on the back of the fact that Kobe Bryant played so well. We haven't talked about Kobe Bryant a lot from last year, but the guy was a solid player for you. And Emari in his rookie year may not be quite up to snuff to play at where the performative level of Kobe Bryant is as an overall game, especially with Bryant's ball skills. Herbicide, Hawks D about to take over. We have all the pieces in place now. No more switching out our inside linebackers and strong safeties halfway through the season. Our D is going to dominate this year. Let's go. Let's go.
The truth shall set you free.
Certainly would not surprise me if this defense was dominant this season. Mike McDonald in his first year as a first-time head coach, as the youngest head coach in the NFL, got you to 10 wins. And we saw that defense get better and better as the year went along, especially as he got the parts and pieces that fit to his defense. A little bit of what we don't talk about here with McDonald is that he inherited all of these guys in here. And he made it work last year. But that was a defense of parts that were not guys that were scouted and designed to fit to a Mike McDonald defense. They were guys that were scouted and designed to fit to a Coach Carroll defense. And there's going to be a bit of a process in onboarding your type of players and getting your kind of guys to make your scheme fly. And I think that they've done that. I think that a lot of the guys work between both schemes pretty fluidly. A Witherspoon can work between a Carroll defense and a McDonald defense, that's for sure. Julian Love has that familiarity with the background. So there's some guys that can do kind of both in this defense, but you're bringing it forward bit by bit, getting the parts and pieces in the right spot to make this thing go. And if it was dominant next year, especially given the schedule we're going to be playing, Herbicide, it wouldn't shock me in the least. Wouldn't shock me in the least. Would be by accident. You know, they've tried to do this by design a little bit. And if you do fall into it, not fall into it, but if you do land into it, then it was purposeful, your approach in hitting there. Seth says, what we're definitely going to start seeing with a full year of this scheme is a lot of simulated pressures and stacking the boxes. A lot of stunts on the defensive line, misdirection blitzes, hella excited. Oh, I am too. I am really too. I love that about defenses and running it that way. The stack boxes and simulated pressures especially are so exciting because it's the modern defense's answer to how can we make offenses be confused? How can we put them under pressure without having to sacrifice on the back end? Because a lot of time the stack boxes and simulated pressures break down post-snap to you still only bringing 4 defensive linemen or 4 guys at the quarterback, and you still then dropping 7 guys back into coverage. The quarterback just doesn't know which guys are going to drop where necessarily. It's a really cool way that they've found to be able to really confuse offenses, protections. And then, like you say, you can run a lot of the stunts and stuff off of that. All of this interworks together. I bring 6 guys, 7 guys up on the line of scrimmage. I'm only going to bring 4. Then those 4 I'm going to be looping and stunting. Well, then you've got what's happened there is the offensive line with the stack box has already set up their protections to pick up the blitzers. Now you're stunting and looping with the 4, and you've got all the offensive linemen kind of in a bit of an uncertainty about who they're exactly picking up on the play. We're having to react to it post-snap really quickly, where we come back to the same thing I talked about with quarterbacks, where this defense's designs is to sort of rip off of the table the quarterback's ability to kind of pre-snap read what's going on or get a real good feel for it, much like in the same way with the offensive line wants to create the same thing. You think you know who you're going to block? You're pretty sure about who you're going to block prior to the snap? Oh, we just changed it all the way post-snap. We just flipped that on its face post-snap. Can you react to that? Can you change it up on the fly that quickly? Or are you the type of offensive lineman that had to kind of know what was coming prior to the snap, know which guy that you needed to block? And in watching our pass protection over the last couple of years be as bad as it is, I'll tell you what, we've had a lot of offensive linemen in here who've had to know who they're going to block prior to the snap. You tell an Anthony Bradford that he's got to think on his feet and figure out who the blitzer's coming from, that guy's going to be lost in the sauce all day long. And there's a lot of offensive linemen in this league that are just like that. Talented, capable, but you get them thinking, you make them have to think a little bit too much, and you diminish them as a player highly. So I love it, Herbicide. I'm in the same place in the thinking this defense has absolutely got the possibility of taking that step forward this year under McDonald. And he is one of those legit minds in this league. He's not riding on the coattails of Buddy Ryan. He's not riding on the coattails of a Rex Ryan before him or a Wink Martindale. This is a guy that's had multiple stops over where he's been successful as a defensive coach. And this is a guy that's running a scheme that is modernized, that is cutting edge. That is why you hired him. And we saw the fruits of that already last year in just his first year. You better believe it's going to be even more of a bushel this season. Dogzilla, at what defensive position are we thinnest in case of injury? I think that there's 2 positions that are kind of equally thin. Cornerback is one that's very, very thin as it stands right now. Josh Jobe, Reek Woolen are your 2 starters. Reek's had some injury history there a little bit that he's dealt with here and there. He's been able to fight through it overall, but you worry a little there. Your backup cornerbacks are going to be Nehemiah Pritchett, Zy Alexander. You know, this is why the team's looking at Rasul Douglas and Shaquille Griffin. And I'd say inside linebacker is another place that's a little bit light. Ernest Jones and Tyree Snyder, very good. But then behind those two guys, you don't have a ton there as far as depth goes. So those would be the two that I'd be most concerned with, Dogzilla. The defensive line, safety, you're sitting in good spots with that. Femi says, sucks about the Cardinals cover back. It seems like they always lose a player before the season starts. Yeah, it does. I guess Sean Murphy Bunting, non-football injury popped up with him, and it's going to cause him to miss the whole season for them. Does suck on that. And you do always wonder on those non-football injuries what it was that got him. What got you there? But now that does lean them on Will Johnson having to carry the day. So hopefully Will Johnson's knee's okay. They've done a good job there, Cardinals, in recent years of getting better depth. I think there's actually, when I look at like the Niners and the Rams, for instance, depth-wise, Cardinals may not be strong at the front end of things with the starters, but they have done a better job in recent years at certain positions, cornerback included in that, and starting to do a good job of getting actual depth there and not just having to lean on those starters. And in Bunting's case, he wasn't exactly a real strong starter for them. He was kind of passable. I mean, he is the reason they drafted Will Johnson, is they feel like they could do better than that. Dogzilla says, I bet D-Law has at least one more strong year in him. I could see it, Dogzilla. We've seen these defensive tackles, as they get into their early 30s towards mid-30s, still be able to play at a very high level. It seems to be the one position defensively that can kind of maintain that extra amount of time versus other positions like cornerback where you're going to be done by 32, 33. You got nothing else left. So I could see him still having a little bit more in the tank. Injury is going to be a big key there, but I could see it. Sean S. says, I think people forget Mike McDonald came in kind of late too in the offseason, so that took some adjusting on that part as well. Absolutely, man. I mean, just putting together practices last year and getting those aligned right and how you're going to train and teach these guys. And all of that was a whole just indoctrination process. And now you've got it in place. Now you've got this thing motoring, the wheels moving, and now you can more hit the ground running, I think, this offseason with OTAs and everything else, to where you're not teaching something from the ground up, but now you're giving those little finite details on the back end of your scheme. You're able to bring out all of the bells and whistles that you want to bring, because you know that you're not going to confuse these guys because they've got the basics down. Last year, you were having to get through the basics. Last year, you were having to get through the poor play of a Dodson and Baker through the first half of the year. You know, you had to iron out some wrinkles. But now maybe the benefits will be now that this year the wrinkles are ironed out. And that bed sheet is smooth. That is like a hotel bed sheet, you know, so tight you get in there and your feet are hurting almost because it's pushing your feet down. You gotta pull the cover out to get your feet up, you know, more right. That's how tight we got this now. Seth says, do you think they buy in on the defense and bring a proven bet in at cornerback to start over Job? I don't know if it's a proven bet to start over Job, Seth. I think it's more of a competition thing and depth. If Job goes out, we don't want to be calling upon Nehemiah Pritchett and Zay Alexander. I think that's where it would really come down to. For instance, if Shaquille Griffin comes in, am I absolutely sure that Shaquille Griffin is going to be a better cornerback than Job at this point in time in his career? I can't say that I'm as certain that that's going to be the case. I think Job might even be a better player at this point. So it's even Steven, but some of that, Seth, has to do with just the talent that's out there remaining at the cornerback position, which is a little bit lean at the moment. It's not bad, but it's lean. You're getting kind of passable guys. Maybe if you go get a guy right now, you're not spending a lot of money. This is also why I would be open to, Seth, looking at the Jalen Ramsey situation, because I know the Rams are in on this and they look like the team that's going to be, trying to lock in on this one. But I look at that Rams thing with them and it's like, look, if they're going to give like a 4th round pick to bring in Ramsey, I'd kind of like to match that / slightly better that. I know Ramsey's older and all that, but you get him for 2 years. The cost is not going to be crazy. He's going to be an effective player for you. He'll fit to this defense. He improves you highly at the cornerback position that you have for Job. I mean, that's a massive improvement over Job. And then you have some insurance for Woolen. If Woolen leaves this offseason, so you're not kind of over the barrel of having to sign him, or you're looking at replacing both outside cornerback positions in one offseason. This is where I would be a little bit on that Ramsey thing. And some of that's informed by the fact that the market's so lean as far as the rest of the cornerbacks that are out there that you can go and grab. MJ Seahawks says, I bet we give up less than 340 points all season. Let's go, MJ. Let's go. I think that the defense is going to be a top 10 defense minimum this year, that they've got an upside that can get into top 5. That's from points allowed to yards allowed. I mean, this is the reason this is the defense won the Triple Crown just 2 years ago with McDonald and the Ravens, is that it can be dominant all the way around. It's not a defense that's like, well, we keep points, but we're bend but don't break. So you're going to have a crap ton of yards, but you just won't score a lot of points. Like, no, we will suffocate you. We will shut you down. We will give you nothing. I love that about this defense, and that is what informs this defense. I always thought that with the bend but don't break, there's always a little bit of a defeatist attitude in that. What are you going to do? Offenses are so good. You can only do so much against them. They're going to get theirs. You can't do anything against that. You just got to hold on for dear life. I hate that. I don't want to hold on for dear life. I want to be aggressive. I want to take it to them. I want to suffocate them. I want to make that quarterback feel like he can't breathe. I want to make that quarterback feel like whatever he's looking at pre-snap is nothing of what he's going to see post-snap. I want that for my defense. That's more to me of the aggressive get after it versus the let's live on our heels and just hope that we can just sort of stem the tide just enough, that the bleeding will only be drip. It won't actually get to the full point of being an artery. No, I don't want to do that. Riverside says, wish John would have let Mike fire Grubb last year when he wanted to. I do too. Hopefully he's learned on that, because it probably would have been for your better to do that, and that you probably get one more game. You probably find a win somewhere in there. Did that get you into the playoffs if your Mike's able to do that? Mike's had a pretty good, seemingly, feel for this job and being ready for this job and understanding what this job entails. I love that about Mike, that I feel like he's a guy that's going to have no issues with making the tough decision at times, and that it's just all about what makes this team better. And I don't care the blowback. I don't care how people are going to receive this. If it's the right decision to do it, then let's do it. And that definitely would have been the case with him. Dogzilla, how old is Jaron Reed? I'm glad we have him back. A leader too? Oh, 32. Cool. Yep, 32. And we'll see how he gets used this year. If they're finally going to try to transition him more back to the nose tackle and free up Byron Murphy, or if he's kind of lived back into that 3-tech role where he really good for you last year in the 3-tech role. Catalyst is Jaron Reed was a gem within multiple bad draft classes between 2016 and 21. He was. Yeah, that's some of the worst recent history in drafting for your Seahawks over the last about 30 years, that 16 to 21 draft classes. But Jaron was a really good player. And, you're kind of seeking in this last draft, Catalyst, to do some similar things to what you did with Jaron, because as good a player as Jaron was, and he was a good player out there at Alabama, you also got a guy that was a leader on that defense. And what did we have in this last draft? How many players in this last draft? 4, 5 were captains on their team last year in college. Teams looking for leaders, looking for good players. Just part of what's so cruel about this class is you went and you got productivity, guys that had produced in college. Some guys, multiple, almost 1,000-yard seasons with the 2 receivers you took. Guys in Riley Mills, back-to-back years, really good production. Emmanwori, great production. Gray Zabel, great production. But then you also got upside, that the extra part you get, because usually you get the production in college, you're not necessarily going to get the upside with that. But you got production, plus you got a lot of the upside with these guys, star potential, as kind of the extra thing. And then the third aspect that's just even more crazier is you got those first 2 things, and then you got a bunch of captains in addition to that. You got a bunch of leaders in addition to that. Usually you got to kind of pick one of those 3 things, and you were able to swoop up all 3 of those things, player after player after player. It's very impressive in this draft class that the Hawks were able to pull that in that way. And we'll get the benefits of that, not only in how these guys play on the field, and we're going to feel the benefits of this, of how this team is guided and directed by the players into future years. And if you want to get to a contender, the next big step that's got to be taking place, and I think it's already undertaken. I think there's guys that are already understanding this and embracing this role, be it a Jaron Reed, a Leonard Williams, a variety of different guys. The leaders have got to step forward. The coaches can only take it so far, but the leaders have got to have that ownership and get this team to take the ownership from the players to take that next big step to becoming a contender. That's been the single thing that I've seen from all great Seahawks teams that you can feel from them, is that those leaders rise up, they take control of that locker room, and they say, we are going to go this direction with this. And that's going to be the part that I'm going to be kind of monitoring and tracking mainly here as we get into the season, if we're feeling that from this team. Seth says, how far off do you think we are from being a top 5 defense? Do you think with McDonald's second year, the coaching staff finally is in place and players feel good about their position it's close? I think it's possible of it happening this year, Seth. If it took another year from now, that also wouldn't blow me away either. You are returning all of your defensive starters from last year. I don't remember the last time here in Seattle that we could say that. And you're returning all those defensive starters from last year off of what was a pretty successful defensive season. We're going to be looking at this, the year one trend stuff and a little bit of that stuff here in the future on this. But he got the turnaround already and instantly in year one, did Mike Macdonald. I'm going to show you guys in next week. One of the shows we're going to do in year one is looking at some of the comparison between Carroll's last year here in Seattle when that defense and where it was at versus the instant first-year returns that you got from Macdonald. And so I only expect that to continue to improve and go more forward. And that opens the door to being a top 5 defense this year. I think it's a top 10 defense minimum, but I think it absolutely has the potential this year to slide into that spot. The key on that being, Seth, I think the very big key on that is going to be difference maker or two kind of rising up. Can one of your edges kind of, really lock in? Can Derek Hall just have that final step of his career go forward and he turns into a sub-dominant player, or a Boye Mafe or DeMarcus Lawrence has a revitalization of his career this season and you get a prime season of Lawrence essentially on that side of it? Does Byron Murphy just suddenly tap into that top 15 talent? I do feel like you got to get some star power from somewhere on this defense, as opposed to just above average solid play, right just below star level, be it a Julian Love or Ernest Jones or a Tyrese Knight. Really solid players just below that level. I think we need to get a couple of guys to rise up as sort of difference makers there a little bit, but the potential is absolutely there for them to take that step this year. The talent's there, the starters returning is there. You've added on top of the talent that was already there that you are returning. All of that adds up to this defense being very good this season. Herbicide says, so Z-Bot said something on the roundtable that kind of made me mad, how the Bills have only one game outside of the Eastern time zone this year, and we have every other game out of the Pacific time zone. It's the benefit of playing on the East Coast, Herbicide. I think that there's probably not a team like the Bills that have as few games outside of the Eastern time zone as they do, but I would reckon to guess that there's a few different teams that are very close to having that amount of games. Just so many teams are compacted so close together out there on the East Coast, and we have so few teams out on the West Coast. It's just kind of the name of the game. It's also why I've said the expansion from an NFL standpoint of things has got to be West Coast driven in the future. You've got to start opening it up in other places, in my opinion, to make this more fair, especially with the NFL's desire and draw to try to get NFL teams to play in Europe. I mean, we already travel more than anybody else, and you're going to try to put European games on top of our back on top of that, and that's not fair. It's not right. So I hope that there's a bit of a correction with that, but it's part of what just makes it harder for us every single year on this, Herbicide. There's no two ways around it. Seth says, Hawks always get screwed with having to travel to the East Coast and play early games outside their time zone. Yep. Just the way it always is going to be on that. Nothing you can do about it. Cal says, well, Mike was only DC for 2 years in Baltimore. In that second year in 2023, his defense was top 5. It could happen, but I think it'll take 3 years instead of 2. I think that there's a possibility within that. The part that I do think about, to your point in this catalyst, is that McDonald came in and was able to inherit from Wink Martindale a defensive personnel that very much fit to what he wanted to execute his scheme from. When he comes to Seattle, he's inheriting Coach Carroll's defensive personnel, which you weren't drafting guys that were looking for the skills that Mike Macdonald was looking for. And in fact, in a lot of ways, what Carroll looks for and what Macdonald looks for in certain things can be a bit different. They definitely have things that overlap that they both like, but there's a lot of stuff that they are going to consciously lean towards. I like this that he does at the forefront of his game versus I like what this guy does at the forefront of his game better. And so there's a bit more of a transitionatory process here from a Carroll to McDonald versus Wink Martindale to McDonald, where those guys are going to do a lot of very similar things. Rose says, I bet we will be top 5 this year. We played like at the end of last year. I could see it. And let's not forget, man, that schedule's set up where you don't have a murderer's row of offenses that you have to play through this year. All the much more reason you have a good chance of being able to do that. And so I wouldn't shock me in the least if this team was top 5. This team's going to be driven by the defense needing to carry the day for their success. But this is by design as well. And it's not that the offense can't do its part or special teams can't do its part, but this is going to be truly a team affair that's going to drive the success this year. It's not driven by one positional group, but that top 5 potential is absolutely there in this team. I bet Mafia will be the one to step up for a huge step up. He's got a contract to think about soon. He could get paid, man. I mean, this is a guy that stands to make a lot of money if he can go out there and get you a 13, 14, 15 sack year. If that next step he takes in his game, you're talking about a guy going from making in the low teens to being able to go up there and command a $20 million a year contract, to go out there and maybe push to get a Josh Sweat-like contract that he got from the Arizona Cardinals. So he's got a lot riding on this, and it wouldn't shock me if he was that guy that stepped forward a lot too. Patrick says, have you seen before and after pictures of Kyle Shanahan memes? Laughing out loud. I have. Yeah. I think coaching does this to most guys in general terms, that unless you have a guy like, let's say, Coach Carroll, that's just so light and airy and can roll with the punches, and you know what I mean, versus those coaches that just get hammered over time, and you can just feel on their face the losses almost, and in the graying of their hair. And in Shanahan, I think that's something that you definitely feel from him, and that it's been a very intense last 6-7 years, and that team gotten so close, just this close, but just can't take it over the line, and how frustrating that must be, and how much that must drive you, and how much that must make you crazy at times to get so very close. I mean, just think about it. You're like it's like getting up to Everest, and you're 100 yards away from the peak, and you slide all the way back down to the bottom. And now next you got to go all the way back up it. You're about 100 yards from the peak, and you slide all the way back to the bottom. Like, yeah, that's probably going to age me too. Brian says, do we have any Thursday night games we got to play cross country? You have no Thursday night games that are cross country. I think that it's the Cardinal game, I want to say. That's the Thursday night game that stands out. Let me see here. I got the schedule up here. So, it's the Cardinal game on the 25th. And then you've got the Thursday night football game with the Rams. And that's going to be at home. So the Cardinal game's on the road. The Rams game at the end of the season in week 16 is going to be at home. So no cross-country Thursday games. That part is good, because that makes it tough when you just play on Sunday, then you got to travel right back out onto Thursday across the country, East Coast. That's no bueno. Thomas says, with the cap space, I believe Seattle will make 2 moves fans and news media aren't talking about. They've got the ability to do it, Thomas. They're in a very unique situation right now. As we were talking about a couple days ago about the cap, that I can't think of any time in the last even 10 years that the Seattle Seahawks find themselves this deep into the offseason with $30 million of cap space that they can work with. Like, they haven't even pulled any of the levers and any deals that are currently on the books to create more space. They have the Noah Fant, $8.5 million that can be saved on that deal if they want to move off of that too. Not saying they will, they just have the flexibility to do this if they wanted to. So they have so many different directions they can go. They have so much versatility they can go. And this may be the year that we come to find, Seth, where John Schneider's want to keep the powder dry pays off more than ever, because like you say, he's not only in a position to make one move, but he could make multiple moves to add still on top of this team, and major moves at that. Not just adding a Roy Robertson Harris, not just adding a Trevis Gibson. I mean, a guy that can actually come in and bring some impact. So he's really in the position to be able to do that. We'll see if he's going to be aggressive in that way. I think he'd like to. Don't know who that guy could be at this point, but I'd like to see it. Femi says that they had the lead in both Super Bowls and fumbled it. That would have messed me up too. Yeah, it's going to be hard. Like, we lost our Super Bowls, and I mean, that loss we had still stings, right? That's that thing. I mean, imagine, multiple times over in recent years. I mean, I think the 2014 Super Bowl probably took, 3 or 4 years off my life alone. So Shanahan's probably lost like 16, 17 cumulative years here with this recent run of things. Not to mention feeling a little bit of the pressure on the back of him, I mean, there's some Niner fans in recent years been talking about being fired. Can you imagine you get to a Super Bowl and it's the second one you've gotten to, and you get into the offseason, you got fans calling for your head? You go, man, what do I got to do? You got to win the Super Bowl. Herbicide, are we keeping Fant? I keep coming back around to the side of saying I don't see how it happens here. Fant is a really H-back tight end. And he's not an inline guy. I think if he was an inline guy, there'd be more of an opening here where you'd say, okay, you have AJ Barner, you have Fant as your inline guys, and then we'll have Arroyo as our H-back. But with having two H-backs, when I think in recent history to any NFL team, not just Seattle, but I think of any recent NFL team that's put their roster together, I can't think of a recent NFL team that's put its roster together with two H-backs and one inline guy when they're carrying three tight ends. Not to mention, I'm not even certain at this point that we're going to carry three tight ends because you have Robbie Oots on the roster. And so traditionally, when you have had a fullback and you're now going to rock with that you've got to pull that then from another positional group. So if you carried four running backs before, maybe now you only carry three tailbacks plus a fullback. If you carried three tight ends before, now you're only carrying two tight ends, but you're carrying the extra basically fullback. So you have five running backs on your roster at that point, essentially. You got to pull from somewhere. And so I come back around to going, this is why teams don't have two H-backs, is you don't have the roster space to accommodate those guys. And so I go, okay, you don't run with two H-backs normally as it is. And then you have Fant with this pretty big amount of money that you can save by moving off of him. I think the only reason that the team hasn't moved off him up to this point is that John probably is side-eyeing a team that maybe like loses a tight end in training camp, and then he can go out there and actually get some value back from Fant as opposed to just releasing him for nothing. But it is a little bit of a enigma situation as to how to deal with that. And maybe they just rock with both of them. Maybe they consider Arroyo to be an outside kind of receiver a little bit, enough to where he takes from the receiver position rather than taking from the tight end position. But with Oots in on this as well, it kind of makes it even a little bit more complicated because you know that they want to have Oots out there as as a active game day roster fullback. Brian says it'd be nice to somehow grab Trey Hendrickson since he continues to disrespect him. Yeah, since he's going to probably have to make that move eventually on it, and that's kind of Cincy's way. They don't like to make trades, but they can eventually begrudgingly be drawn into it if the player just digs his heels in. Carson Palmer had to go through this and digging his heels in to get moved eventually. And that very well may be the case here with Trey Hendrickson. I don't know on if the fit would be exact here because with Hendrickson, he is more of pass rusher than he is run defender at this point in his career. I think that's where he really does lean. But that is one of the guys that does stand out that's available to you on the market right now if you can make the right offer to bring him in. So we'll see. Definitely a possibility. Nate says, do you think John and McDonald will re-sign Woolen next year? What do you think Woolen's fate will be? You think he's not a McDonald guy? Well, I've been a little bit more in the camp of feeling like this is a guy that is probably not a guy that McDonald leans on in the long term. I think that they looked at this offseason and they didn't feel like they were going to get value back moving him in any kind of trade, that it worked out best in their favor to have him play out the final year of his rookie deal, going for a big contract, that you're going to get your best version of Woolen this year. He's not a bad player. I would say that. He's absolutely got great ball skills. He can cover like hell. It just comes down to the tackling did slightly improve last year. I'll give him some credit on that. But I also think then he had like a new issue that started to raise up to the surface last year, which was concentration issues. McDonald talking about his ability at times to be able to lock in on every rep and not have these reps where he just mentally kind of checks out a little bit. And that's a new thing that came up last year. And it doesn't make it any easier in making this evaluation, Nate, about whether you should keep him or whether you should let him walk. And I'm a bit torn on this one, to be honest with you. I think if he comes out and he goes and gives you a 6 or 7 interception year, that if his coverage grades hold strong, and that if he can continue to take steps forward as a tackler, I think the team's absolutely open to signing him to an extension, mainly because they have the cap space. And then if you do let him walk at that point, you're very likely to have to go look for 2 starting outside cornerbacks in one off season for a team that you're going to be hoping is definitely ready to go contend into 2026 at that point. We don't know for sure about 2025, but I mean, this team ain't trying to contend in 2026. I don't know what the hell they're doing. So that's where that could drive that and make that a little bit harder to answer that question with a lot of accuracy. But I have also wondered a little bit with this with Woolen in the sometimes not always playing with that purified fire out there and getting after it like you'd like guys to get after it. I mean, the difference between him and Witherspoon and how they attack blocks and how they try to go make tackles. Yeah, Witherspoon's a better tackler, but the effort and the willingness aspect between those two players is night and day. And I just feel like McDonald at times, if I was a coach watching that, it would dissuade me from a player. Even with a guy that is as good of ball skills as he has, as good of a cover guy as he is, I go, boy, but the tackling stuff, I still got to kind of work around here, and I don't like that. I got to kind of protect him a bit. But it's not an easy question to answer. I could see it kind of go either way there, Nate. It really is going to be driven by the final year of Woolen's development, and if he does take that like last final step forward in his game to become basically a Pro Bowl level corner and to be able to, produce that on a yearly basis as far as what he does. What's up, Brian? It's good to see you in the house, brother. Mr. Kane, Brandon Kane, to continue with Nate's question, I was watching Chat Sports. I know, but they're fun. They're saying we could be in the hunt for Greg Newsome. Any thoughts? Watched a little bit of Greg Newsome coming out of college a few years ago. And I liked him at that time. I thought he was a pretty good player. I think that there was some questions with him about how much, there was, I think there was questions with him off the field, I think was as much as anything else. 52 overall grade last year. You're getting a guy that is, he's a couple of years, 21, 22, 23. He was passable in there. 6'1", 192, former first round selection, only 25 years old. You do wonder a little bit, Mr. Keen, about defenders in that defense and the grades that they get. There's something that I always do try to pay attention to on defenders that are playing on poor teams, and there might be poor teams, not necessarily because of just implicitly the defense, but that you have an offense that can get nothing done. And so the defense is living on the field, and then it's just a matter of time before you're going to have your share of issues kind of pop up a little bit, even if you're somewhat of a solid defense. But I don't know if he's done a ton in his pro career. Up until last year, he was pretty solid. I haven't done a deep dive on him and know a lot about what might have taken into account last year. It does look like he was maybe dealing with some injury stuff at some point or another, but he's got a pretty good missed tackle rate. Not a lot of ball skills he's shown off as a pro here. Had a good year in 2023. I'll say that. A little bit above average, 11 pass breakups, 2 interceptions. He is an outside corner purely. So it does give you a guy that's an outside. And look, Mr. Kane, when you're talking about some of the other names that we're pushing on here, Shaquille Griffin, I'm not big on Shaquille Griffin. I know what he brings to the table, and I know a lot about what he doesn't bring to the table. Rasul Douglas could be kind of an equivalent here. The thing with going with Newsome is you got to give up some pick to get him. It's going to be probably a 5th round pick or something, but you're going to have to give something up to get him versus Rasul Douglas. You could just sign him off the street at that point. And so I'm open to it. There's not a lot of great options out there right now, Mr. Kane, at the outside corner position. But what does stand out right now is that you have a big need here to kind of get some more depth. You are a little thin there right now. And getting something a little bit more established would be very helpful. Brian says, not a fan of midday shows for my world. I'm sorry about that, man. I want to kind of lock these in because I just want to kind of get them knocked out for my day so I can get into the, we do the evening ones, Brian, and they just end up going for so too late, too long. So it's just trying to get locked in on a kind of consistent schedule here. Thomas says, Brandon, didn't Seattle prove when Mike McDonald as a rookie head coach won 10 games and almost won a division? Yeah, I would think that absolutely proves a guy's mettle to be able to do that in his first year as a first-time head coach, as the youngest head coach in the NFL, Thomas. It is a very impressive thing what he pulled off last year, especially being that this was, again, last year, one of the toughest divisions in football. So he wasn't being given some easy pathway to go find that success. Besides, is they talking about that switch to play 10 games a year now? If that's the case, I think they should switch to a 57-man roster. Hopefully they expand the rosters if they do that, Cool Breeze. They've been hesitant to do that, but you got to do that if you go into 18 games. I don't want to see 18 games myself. We don't need that. I mean, more football is always better, but man, the whole season will be just weird. Thomas is, I thought it was funny. Jake thinks the Rams will win 13 games when they were very lucky in how many games, and an INT that wasn't caught, a lucky win against Buffalo, etc. Yeah, I mean, they definitely were able to kind of get through just last year in a couple of those games by the skin of their teeth, to your point on that. But I think Jake's got a right to feel good about this team. They won the division. That's the brass tacks of it. They didn't have any major losses this offseason from that personnel group that they went out there. They played the Eagles in Philadelphia, tougher than the Chiefs played the Eagles on a neutral field. I think that does stand out to me as well. So I don't think they're winning 13 games, Thomas, but I can understand Jake being confident into where they're at. They're the reigning guys. They're on top, and it's on us to kind of knock them off that point. Go Brees says Stafford's regressing this year, and I think they win 10 games. Jake's bugging. Well, I definitely don't have them winning 13 games. And I think 10, 11 wins this year is probably more attuned to what I expect from the Rams. But Stafford's health is going to be a big part of it, to your point. Big part of it. Riverside says, I was saying how I thought the Niners were only going to win about 7 games this year. Now I'm thinking they might win 10 because of how easy their schedule is. You can't undersell that part of it, Herbicide. I mean, it's not an easy schedule. Well, it's just on paper. It's an easy schedule. And it is as easy a schedule as we have seen in probably years in this division. There's not another team, be it Seattle or anybody else, that's been able to go through a cakewalk of a schedule like the Niners are going to be able to next year. And it's too well coached of a team. It's still a team with too much talent. The only way they're going to avoid not getting 10 wins next year is if they have a multitude of injuries to some of these older vets. Trent Williams goes down, Kittle goes down, McCaffrey's not the same. Okay, they're going to have a harder time to get to that 10-win spot. But if the top heavy guys on that roster can maintain, I'm fully expecting it. Catalyst is Jay Harbaugh better improve the kickoff returns and coverages. This year especially, we're going to be doing a show next week, Catalyst, about the new kickoff rule change that's not really been talked about a lot, really, here this offseason amongst Hawk fans as much. But boy, I think that this rule change and just the moving of the downs to 35-yard line on kicks through the back of the end zone, I think that this is really going to reinvigorate the kickoff coverages and the return game. And it's got to be better this year. Jay was definitely a step backwards last year from Larry Izzo. Seth says, I'm going to start recruiting some of the chat sports fans to your channel. They don't know what they're missing. Thank you, Seth. I appreciate that, man. I do appreciate that. Beating More Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. Any vacation plans for the off season? It's a very good question on that front of it. I've been turning over some things. We're going to go and do the training camp thing this year. So I think I'm going to go to training camp for a little bit, even be in there a little bit more than I was last year. I'm going to try to do, I'd like to get to 3 training camp days if I can this year, where I did 2 last year. So going to get up to Seattle if I can. I think we're going to do the daily show all the way as we can, kind of through to June. And then as we get into the end of June, we're going to probably take like a week or 2 off on the channel to kind of regroup. And I might go do a quick vacay somewhere, go pop off somewhere along the line. But I'm not sure yet. I can't quite decide on anything, Feed Me. I'm turning over some options, but nothing's super standing out to me right now. I get so locked in with my head down, Feed Me. It's just hard to vacation. What? I got stuff to do here. But probably something in July I'll go do just before we get to start training camp. Thomas says, what would be the NFC's round table if Seattle traded for Micah Parsons or Trey Hendrickson? Well, I think Parsons would be a lot more groundbreaking for the crew if they saw Seattle add him. I think with Hendrickson, they'd say, hey, it's a good move by Seattle. You've upgraded your edge. He's going to be a good player for you. But I think that they'd look at Parsons as a little bit more of a dynamic factor you've added in at that point if you did that. Would it shift the balance of power from their standpoint? Would it make Jake not think that the Rams are going to still win the division? No. Those guys, I think, are still pretty locked into where one player isn't going to move the needle for them on Seattle's team. Probably should. But I think that they have a pretty strong outlook to what they see of Seattle this year. And a lot of it's like the same thing that you get from Vegas, or much of the national opinion on Seattle is that when you really pull the thread all the way down to the end on this one, it's really people's opinion of Sam Darnold, or the low opinion of Sam Darnold. And that's driving things even beyond the first really nice year of success for Mike Macdonald as a first-year head coach. Whether that's right or wrong, we'll see. But I do think that's more of what's at the forefront of what's kind of moving this in the direction it's moved as far as people's general narrative on Seattle. My guess. Thomas says, I know history says Milroe might not hit his potential, but if history was 100%, might Russ 100%, right? Russ wouldn't have made it for the Seahawks. Mahomes and Allen wouldn't be the best 2 quarterbacks in the NFL. Yeah, there's always exceptions and breaks in the rule. There's always guys that will, break what is the common thinking when it comes to it. So it's possible he's able to do it. There is the talent there to do it, Thomas. You know what I mean? I think it's hard in certain respects in generalizing the quarterback position to me, and that's where it comes down to kind of the details of it, of what does a quarterback got to clean up? What does an individual quarterback have to overcome to hit that upside of things? And, for instance, I see a lot of people that'll make the comparison to Allen, and that Allen had the same things that he was dealing with that are exactly the same things that Milroe is dealing with. And I would beg to say that that was not the case. The accuracy issues with Josh Allen had less to do with him mechanically just being completely out of whack and much more to me to doing with, like, he's playing on Wyoming. He's throwing to Wyoming receivers that aren't able to catch his 100-mile-an-hour fastball even when they're wide open. And Russ's case, it was the height thing, and NFL's kind of, they looked at you like you needed the scarlet letter A if you were under 6 foot as a quarterback at that time. There was no imagination that a quarterback over 6 foot could play, even a guy that had so much college success and who had played in a pro system and had gone to multiple college programs and been successful at each of those programs. Whereas with Milroe, you've got the specificity of processing, the throwing motion needing to be fixed fully from the ground up in so many ways. But there's not the certainty on it that he can't hit that spot as well. And, these things occur. There's times where guys can surprise you. There's times that guys can go at it. I think it is, as they've said many times over there with the Milroe situation, it's a lotto ticket. And if it hits, you're going to be a multi-million-dollar winner. But what we also tend to know about lotto tickets is that they don't tend to hit. It tends to be the general way it goes. So I'm hopeful for it. I'd love to see it. It would be a big bastion for the Seattle Seahawks to have a quarterback that they got in the third round like this that could become that guy. Especially in his case, that if he rounds into his upside, unlike a Russell who could never really get around the fact he's 5'9", this guy's got the size. This guy's got the arm strength. This guy's got the mobility. So he does check a lot of the boxes if he can get to that point of cleaning up some of the things that are problematic in his game. Scoo says, I'd much rather have Newsom. I'm with it. I just haven't looked at a lot of him as a pro. He's been out there in Cleveland. I did scout him coming out of college, but just haven't checked him out since he's gone to the Browns. Brian, he says, Woolen's rookie year, I think, was a bit of a disservice to him and the team. 6 interceptions in a rookie season sort of catalyzes the idea that a cornerback can be a ball hawk and only engage in man coverage. I think I know what you mean. I'm not quite exactly sure what you're saying there. Catalyze the idea that we're... Yeah, there might be a bit of that to it. I appreciate it, Brian. We'll get some evening shows out too at some point. Mr. Kane, got to run, but I have to say thank you for the great stream as always. Go Hawks. Subscribe and hit that like, folks. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Kane. Have yourself a great Friday and an awesome weekend. Thomas says, my worry is that Stafford is how old and he came close to being traded. Rams are good, but not elite. They've got some age on him, man. They're like the Niners. They're very top heavy, and Stafford's at the front of that. And Stafford's gotten very old, and he's played a lot of games. And he got through last year on the health-wise. There were some close call moments, some very, very close call moments. Can he get around that this year on it? We'll see. That's these kind of older quarterbacks like that. You're always on the line. You never know when they might drop back, like we saw with Rodgers or with Kirk Cousins a couple years ago, where the Achilles heel just suddenly snaps out of the blue on you. Where everything's rolling and you're rolling great, and then just suddenly it's a non-contact injury puts you down as a quarterback at that age. It's happened. It's happened many times over before, a lot of different quarterbacks. So we'll see how he can hold up on that. He's a tough guy. He's a warrior. But I will give you that it's no guarantee there on that one. Nate says, hey, B, another question. How do you compare Arroyo to Kyle Pitts at tight end? I think that they're definitely hard to make a comparison with them on that, in my opinion. I think Kyle Pitts is just more explosive. There's just a little bit more there as far as his get up and go, vertical leap, ball skills between him and Arroyo are going to be different, I would say. Both of them would be fast for their size. Kyle Pitts ran a 4.4, 4.40, I think, on his pro day or whatever. I think they were saying with Arroyo, they felt like he could run a 4.53. So just a little slower there. Not quite the ball skills that Kyle Pitts has. I think he's a better blocker than Kyle Pitts is. I don't think substantially, but I think he's a marginally better blocker than Kyle Pitts. Hard part of this as well is that Pitts wasn't as much at the Florida system running as much of the just pop pass stuff that Miami would have Arroyo run at times where, he's very limited route tree, kind of manufactured touches, not letting him just go run the routes and beat the guy and then have Ward hit him in step. There's a lot less of that. So it makes the comparison hard to sometimes put together on that between the two guys. But I think as far as the general comparison between the two, Nate, that's the takeaway that you could come away with both of them, is that you have guys at a size, height, length standpoint of things who move much faster and can change direction much better than guys normally at that size, even top-end prospects at that size. You're much more getting into a place of feeling like you're getting a 4.6-ish guy than you're getting the 4.44 or the 4.53 kind of guy. And so it's that real, hey, the guy's 245, 250 pounds, but he runs a 4.5, 340. If I get a guy that's at 225 pounds running a 4.5, 340, not as impressive. You put 25 pounds on the guy, though, at that size he's doing that? Okay, well, then that part does stand out. So they do have that part that does go together with them. But then aside from that, I think that they're a little bit different of players and how they operate. And there's some things Arroyo does probably better, and there's some things Pitts does probably better on his side of it. I think Arroyo's got much more blocking upside. I think Arroyo's got much more of an ability, Nate, to be able to play more tight end stuff than Pitts does, where Pitts is more of a, to me, de facto receiver when it's all said and done. Patrick says, honestly, I'm more interested in the process and vision of this team. I'm not tripping. If this is a down year, even if this is an easy schedule this year, excited to see the process. I feel the same way, Patrick. I've said I felt like the team took a bit of a step back this year to take 2 steps forward. So I look at it as a positive in what they did this offseason and not signing Geno and DK, and that this was a bit of a necessity by where things have been playing out at the current fork in the road we find ourselves. And that because they made the smart decision this offseason, that it will pay off in the long term. You might also see it pay off in the short term, but it's more about the long term of having that confidence. I think the team's moving in the right direction. I think they're making much more smarter decisions than they're not. And this is then going to lead us to becoming a contender. But like you say, I'm not sure if it's this year that happens or we're going to have to wait a year down the line for it to happen, but I do feel like it's going to occur. Thomas, Niners need to prove it to me. I can see they can win 10 games. The Niners get too injured, especially with their age. This isn't the 2021 Niners, and Purdy wasn't as good as people think. Injuries are going to be the key, man. To your point, Thomas, what sunk them last year? Was it lack of talent? Was it that they had the talent drain from free agency, from so much Super Bowl run? No, it was that this top-end heavy roster got too many injuries. Trent Williams, injured. Brandon Ayuk, injured. Christian McCaffrey, injured. Fred Warner playing with, fracture in his foot through a lot of the year. That's all it takes. A couple of those guys go out. The rest of the ship goes down with it in a lot of ways. Last place team. And they find themselves on the same kind of precipice this year where it's, a rock hanging on the edge of the cliff. And it's like that movie Black Sheep, where it's you got Chris Farley in the bottom in a cabin at the bottom of the hill, and there's this big rock at the top of the hill. And a hawk flies over the top of the rock and he poops on the rock, and the landing of the poop is just enough to knock the rock off the spot and have it start to roll downhill into the cabin. And Farley gets taken out and a fridge lands on him, and he looks at his buddy and he goes, "I got a bowl of pudding in my pants from the fridge." He's like, "Buddy, there wasn't any pudding in that fridge." It's a great scene if you get a chance to check that out. Thomas, what's my top 5 favorite football films? Top 5 favorite football films. I guess I'd go in no given order. North Dallas 40, Nick Nolte back in the what was it, late 70s, early 80s on that one, I think. On that, you got the program. You got to put the program in there. Good question. I'll have to think about the next 2. I'm turning over a couple of options on the next 2. Haven't been as many great football. We Were Titans, maybe. The Denzel one was pretty good. don't know if I have a strong opinion on the top 5 football films there, Thomas. They all kind of run together. We haven't had like a lot of good classic football movies, really. We got some solid ones, but nothing that's really different. Or guilty pleasures like Draft Day. Even the program's kind of a guilty pleasure. We haven't had like a really classic, great football movie, I don't feel like. Whereas with like baseball, we've had like 3 like phenomenal, at least 3, if not like 7 or 8 phenomenal baseball movies. Just capture the spirit of the sport. It doesn't have to be super dumb or trying to play for laughs. Can play kind of straight up. Deron Evers says Purdy's mobility and escapability are underappreciated. I agree, Deron. His 10-yard split and ability to get away from pressure that's just right on top of him, instantaneous. He doesn't get as much credit for that, and he should, because he's got a difference-making component in that ability alone, and he's just got a good feel in the pocket so that he can feel that pressure mounting. It's not that he's going to bust you off a Jalen Milroe 50-yarder, but he can go sneak and grab you a couple of first downs over the course of the game where you've got that pressure on him, and that's just backbreaking for a defense. McDonald talked about those mobile quarterbacks and how hard that can be with that. I don't know where Pismo is. I think it's somewhere around here in San Diego. I'm not positive on that. Brian, Hawks Nest. Yeah, that was confusing the way I wrote that. What I essentially meant was Reek's got to be complete cornerback, not just engage mentally when in press coverage and let someone else make the tackles. That's it with him. And it's you got to stay locked in this sport. Every snap matters. You don't have the opportunity to just sort of take plays off. And there's some times with him mentally where I just feel like he's got to lock it in. I go back to the Packer game last year, end of the half. And we're going to do a show, Brian, really looking at these things specificity-wise and look at the exact plays. And let me show you guys what's going on these plays to kind of, because you can kind of talk this about the player, but you really want to kind of show what you mean with it. But at the end of the half, there's like 7 seconds left on the half. They're at the 50-yard line. The team's going to go, or it's like 3 seconds left, I think. So it's going to be like the final play. Team's going to go take a shot down the field. They're going to take a shot down the field. As a corner, you have to know that. Yet he gets caught kind of just trailing on the receiver and allowing him to separate down the field, and then has to try to run to catch up back into the play and ends up having a flag caused. It's like because you were not locked in on that play. You were not aware of what was going on. You were just kind of just playing the play. And you got to sometimes think as a player. You can't always just rely upon what you do athletically. And there's a few of those plays from him last year where that was the case. Him on the Rams game, one of the more important plays of the whole season last year, where you're in cover 0. You're bringing a cover 0 blitz, which means you have no help on the backside with any safety help. He's aligned out there in man coverage on Robinson. And what is he doing prior to the snap, post-snap? For some reason, he's trying to peek in the backfield like, why are you even peeking the backfield? Because you're not going to go up and make the play. That's not what you do, really. So why are you peeking? And in peeking, he brings his feet to a standstill, and that's just the time that Robinson needs to then create the separation over the top, and Stafford sees it all day long, especially Stafford knowing he's got a cover 0 blitz situation. It's just kind of those plays with him where you're like, what are you thinking there? What is your process that leads you to be peeking there? You're in man coverage. You have to stay on top of this guy. He cannot stack you. You cannot let that happen on this play. Unfortunately, he did. Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $5 donation, Kevin. I appreciate you for that. Says, are we satisfied with the interior defensive line depth? Any dark horse trade candidates remaining offseason deadlines? You give up premium picks? Nooner shows, love them. Well, thank you for that, Kevin. I appreciate that. I have recently tried to go back through and look at the teams that have defensive line depth that we can maybe utilize, specifically going back to the nose tackle position is the one that stands out to me. And unfortunately on this one, Kevin, in doing the deep dive, I was not able to pull much from it. The nose tackle position is becoming a very valuable one in the NFL, mainly as much because there's just so few good quality ones out there. I think what you're going to probably have to do with this, Kevin, is if you're going to look to reinforce the actual defensive line depth and not edge, so it's not a Trey Hendrickson or maybe a TJ Watt suddenly becomes available or a Micah Parsons suddenly becomes available. So if it's not the edge and we're talking about simply defensive line, we know that it's not going to be a 3-tech. It's going to be that nose tackle position. And if that's the case, doing the research I've done, there's nobody that's available right now that's a quality nose tackle. You're going to have to wait to the trade deadline and that one of these teams that thought they were going to be a contender falls off. And then you can go try to grab that guy at that time. Still no guarantees that guy will be available because there are so few of them out there. But that's the only way at this point to me, Kevin, that stands out as a method to be able to add it. I could not, and I did do a little bit of a look through team by team on this, Kevin. I could not find any team that was sitting in a pretty position to give you one of their nose tackles. Most teams just have barely one, much less have two legitimate ones that, you know, can hold a line there. So I'm going to be more on the lookout, see if there's something that does jump out. But then the research I did, there wasn't much standing out on that note of things. Thomas says, have you watched Dan Vienne's show's Wednesday show that had a guy who likes Seattle and thinks the defense will be top 5 next season? I could see it, man. And Dan does great work out there. Definitely recommend everybody out there do sub up to Dan Vienne's and what he's doing over there, Seahawks Forever. But it wouldn't shock me if that's the place they're at, Thomas. It's definitely, that's not I wouldn't even say that's like super hyper bold take. I think that there's a very feasible pathway to this team getting to becoming a top 5 defense next year, especially with the schedule. Thomas says also, if Milroe doesn't work out, they are last. It'll help Seattle quarterback like Sellers, Allers. Also, if Seattle. Yeah, I think what you're saying there is that because you got Milroe in the 3rd round, that if it isn't a workout, you're not out some great draft capital. And I would 100% agree with you on that. And that's part of what, you know, I'm not in, Thomas, on believing that Milroe is going to be able to get this stuff figured out, really. I just don't have enough of a track record of guys that have this much to kind of fix, even with the upside they have, to believe it's going to happen. But with that said, taking a lotto ticket flyer on a guy like this in the 3rd round is not a bad, awful, atrocious mistake. Quarterbacks are hard to find. It's an inexact process and an inexact science in determining who's going to be good and who's not going to be good. NFL, I think, has gotten a little bit better about making this determination in the last 10 years than they were the 10 years prior. So I think it is getting better and better there. But like you say, if you come to find out this year that those skills are not going to come forward, and while you're not expecting him to get to the ultimate refinement that he will be hopefully 2 years from now and working on his game, you will get an idea after a year, won't you, Thomas, to your point, about whether or not he's in a position to be able to continue to take those strides where you go, okay, we got through a year of this guy. He started out here as far as mechanics. He started out here as his processing. We've made him live in the VR headset. We've had him work on his mechanics with Jordan Palmer and just lock that stuff in. And we've gotten a year down the line, and this stuff is really highly improved from where it was. And that emboldens us to believe that we give him another year down the line and it will only improve further. Verse, to your point on that, you get a year down the line and you're like, we've made him live in the VR headset. We've made him work on the mechanics. It's still not consistently coming forward. We might need to look for a quarterback in this next upcoming draft. This lotto ticket's not likely to pay off. So you're not out any major horrible thing if it doesn't work. And if it does work, you've got yourself a 3rd round quarterback that's got all the talent in the world. So, you know, I agree with you. I got no issue with that. It doesn't prevent you from coming back and look at the quarterbacks in next year's draft or the year after at that point. You know, you're just taking a swing. And what is good to see on this, Thomas, is that there's been an organization that hasn't taken a lot of swings on quarterbacks. It's hard to ever get your franchise guy if you never end up picking any guys. You know, if you're always kind of punting every single year to the next year to finding that franchise guy. So I'm okay with it at the end of the day on it. You know, I get what they were doing with it. I just ultimately don't want to artificially, you know, try to sell people on something I don't believe with the fact about, you know, that stuff will come forward here. I hope it does. I want to see it. I'm not rooting against him. I'm not. I want to be completely wrong on this, but there's such a rich history of quarterbacks that have so much rawness like this coming out that it struggle to be able to refine it all down or refine it down enough to be consistently, you know, great to reach the capacity of the potential that they tease. The longest yard. There we go, Sean. Thank you. You saved me on that. I got to put the longest yard, the original with Burt Reynolds. That's got to be in there, 100%. And necessary roughness is a good one too. Yeah, Niners 2 injuries away from potentially crashing and burning. Good way of putting it. 2 specific injuries, you know. Placements was good. That's kind of same. There's some good Varsity Blues. All the Right Moves. Remember the Titans? You know, they're good movies. Friday Night Lights, they're good movies. Has there really been a great football movie? Rudy, that's another really good one. Rudy was probably great. Rudy captures it for all of us not quite big enough, not quite fast enough guys that wanted to play. Little Giants. You guys got some good suggestions. LeBron Woodland's football IQ is horrible. Yeah, he's a former wide receiver translating the defensive side, and you sometimes feel that from him on reps, and that's also where maybe there's some hope there that he can eventually figure it out, is that this is still a relatively new thing for him. Seth says, can we convert Anthony Bradford to nose tackle? Laughing out loud. Maybe. He's big enough. I'll tell you that, Seth. He is big enough. Thomas says, it's crazy Rob Staten loves Seattle's draft, and he is, in my mind, very critical of the Seahawks. Yeah, I think that's where you've got to get a lot of respect for a guy like Rob in this case of things, because, Rob took a lot of heat in recent years for being, critical of the organization, critical of Coach Carroll, critical of the direction that they were going. And, he cost himself, probably gaining more subscribers and more fans in being honest and telling people, this is where I see this being at. And where I think that is the best place to be when you're creating content, because I think there's so much of a drive on this to just be positive at every turn, because the fans' blowback is so heartily there when you do anything but basically just say nothing but praises of the fan base. But the benefit of that is that if you can keep that line, you may not get as much of an audience, but then the audience that you do have knows that you're being honest with them at every turn, and they never have to question where you're coming from, and that you believe what you say. I think it's one of the most inherent important things to doing this kind of stuff. And that the second that you lose that, and that everything becomes positive Paul, and everything becomes like a PR firm essentially for the team, I think we got enough of that in Seattle already. I think the local reporters do enough of that already in Seattle. This is where I think it's so important on this to be that way, and it's not easy. I can tell you guys it's not easy. I just went through it in this last draft. And the blowback that I got for not having an opinion that this draft was an A+. I didn't even hate this draft. I gave it a B, but there was so much blowback for simply not giving it an A+. And that's just kind of the representation in doing this that you fight up against sometimes. But I have a lot of respect for those folks that can hold the line on this and keep their integrity, because I think you can kind of feel and see it when people are gliding and sliding in the other direction, It gets a little bit dirty on that side of it, I think. But Rob does great work. Herbicide, I came across a 12 chat show based out of England. Strange to hear how they think about stuff. Well, they're, new fans over there in England and kind of figuring out football and stuff. I think that they're going to get into it, though. That's for sure. Yeah, Roy Froelich, North Dallas 40 would be on my top 5, too. It's got to be on the top 5, too, for me as well. And boy, that was a brutal look at football. That's sort of like the Any Given Sunday before Any Given Sunday in the late 70s. Thomas says, I look at the upside mostly with Milroe. I've gotten frustrated not trading up or not taking a quarterback. I thought Seattle should have gotten aggressive to get Stroud or Penix. It didn't happen. Take a swing. Yeah, you got to take a swing. You're right on this. Thomas, and you and I have talked a lot about this in recent years past, in that, I've been very patient in my thinking that, the understanding why the team hadn't taken the swing up at this point. And that was really mainly because the talent wasn't there to do that as much. I mean, you make good points about you could have traded up for Penix or Stroud, but the cost would have been tremendously great to do that. So this year was the year that I predicted coming into the draft and said that this is going to be the year where I've said every year, and you can attest to this, Thomas, where I've said every year coming in the draft, not going to be the year we're going to get a quarterback this year. Not going to be the year that we're going to get a quarterback this year. This was the year I was expecting fully for John to finally start to take those swings. Or now's the time, now's the place, let's go. And you've done so. And he swung big without giving up big draft capital to swing big. He's gone for huge points of upside here. So there's a lot in this that I like with it. A lot in this I like with the Milroe side of it. I may have some reticence to believe he's going to hit that upside, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. And it doesn't mean that just because it's been hard to develop some of these skills of a quarterback in the last 30, 40, 50 years of football, that it doesn't mean that the NFL doesn't progress forward in starting to be able to develop these skills. There's always room for things to come forward in that way. Nothing is ever stagnant when it comes to how you train guys. And when it comes to the quarterback position, it's maybe the most complicated position in all of sports to kind of learn in that way. But I do like that they took the swing. I do. And the good news is with Milroe is that you will get some value out of him, even if he doesn't ever really fully develop into that franchise quarterback. You will find a way to get him some snaps on the field, and he'll find a way to be effective, I think, in those snaps. HHG can be play nose tackle. I am thinking about doing a fun video. I was going to do it with my brother. I'm going to go get a helmet and some things. I think I'm going to do a fun video just offline. We'll do it as an upload. I think I'm going to make my case to be the DK replacement. I know we've got Cooper Kupp. I know we got some receivers on this roster. But I think what we really need to do is finally look at the guy right here that grew up on Largent. Okay? I got some nice feet. So I'm going to put a video out here soon making my case to the Seattle Seahawks that I can be the fill-in for DK. I can be the DK replacement. Okay? I'm ready to do it. So you guys just be ready because that video is coming. It's coming. But I can do nose tackle as well. I'm going to end up 15 yards down the field and pancaked into oblivion. But it'll look like I'm trying really hard. Y2K, thank you for the $5 donation. Y2K. Also, I really appreciate Robin Barrett for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for that, Robin. I ate too much homemade habanero pico de gallo and my mouth is on fire. It's too damn delicious. I just want more. Man, that sounds good. That sounds actually kind of tasty right now. Well, never forget, Y2K, you can always go with the milk to offset if you really got to. You know what I mean? If you really got to. And that butt is going to be on fire tomorrow. I think you're going to be shooting some flames, man. Some volcanic flames are coming out tomorrow, Y2K. Yeah? You're going to be holding on to that toilet seat with two hands. Brian, he said the Brits are probably more into NFL now because took Aiden Durd from them as a defensive coordinator. That's true. That's also, they got the British connection there with our DC on that. I'm glad to see the Brits are on it, you know? I never thought it was right that they were all just with soccer. I just felt like they had to get a taste of football and they would be in if they could just get a little bit better of an understanding of it, you know? But it's taken off and it's really cool to see NFL in general terms. I don't like the international travel, but I do like seeing how many people across the world are embracing the sport or picking their teams or, you know, watching every game. Some of these folks happen to get up at 2 a.m. to watch the games. Just it speaks to how committed they are and how much they love the sport to do that. And I think that's so cool that it's expanding in that way. Thomas says, I understand why you thought your opinion with this draft pick. Heck, you and me haven't agreed with Geno, but I agree patience is needed. Yeah. And I'm okay giving him the time, you know, give him the 2 years. I hope they don't rush him out on the field this year, Thomas, and just truly give him this 2-year period. You have the points that you know that he needs to develop and get better at. Let him get better at it. You can bring him in for some smattering of snaps out of the read option game if you want to run that here and there. But give him the 2 years. Don't force it. Let him have that time. And then let's see where this thing is after having that 2 years of development. And if he's taken to at that point. I'd love to see it if they can. Ricardo says, Milroe's a VR trooper. I want him living in that thing. I want him sleeping in that thing. I want every waking moment. I said this. I want to see him on interviews where he goes to the OTA interview podium, right? He's got the jersey, he's still sweating. And then you look at his face and he's got the VR indentation over his eyeballs and into his forehead. I want to see that every time he does an interview. Living in it. Living in it. And turn the speed up to 150 too, just like Jane Daniels does. Hey, Josh, the draft was a huge roll of dice. There's no way to know yet if we won any prizes. Very true. What do they say? You got to wait usually 3 years before you make your determination. Yeah, Thomas, they're going to do him on the VR training. So they've indicated that he is going to do that. And I would be, if I was John Schneider, if I was talking to John Schneider, I'd say, embrace this, make him do it. You know, they had to have Kyler Murray have 5 hours a week, right, in his contract. Remember in the other contract, he had to do film study for 5 hours and they were going to track him. I'd do the same thing with Jalen Milroe. I'd be like, I want you in this thing at least 2 hours a day. 2 hours a day. Carlos says more VR Madden, less VR Call of Duty. Do they have VR Call of Duty? I don't think you can do VR Call of Duty. You should be able to, but that's another. We've seen the Black Cat more recently. That's an omen. Yeah, she's kind of being less shy. I'm kind of digging it. Kind of digging it. Zena's showing up a little bit here. Phoebe says, can Nick Emmanwori play the slot like Julian Love and Kobe Bryant? Yeah, he can play the slot. He's got slot snaps out there in North Carolina or South Carolina. But I think that as we were kind of touching at the top of the show on this Feed Me, I think it's you might have him here and there play a little bit of slot, but you're going to keep Devin Witherspoon there by and large. It's Witherspoon's going to live there 80% of the time in the slot. So very small number of snaps, maybe here and there, maybe in dime looks where he's kind of a slot there or down by the goal line. But I think overall, you're going to have him really in more of a safety alignment more often than not. So he can do it, but not do it. He's not going to do it a lot. Yeah, we do need to eliminate hip hop dancing from the Olympics. That was ridiculous. That girl from Australia with her fake, like, oh my gosh. Thomas says, I hope they don't copy the Colts model, what they are, but if they copy Lamar Jackson. Thomas says, shoot, I'd never done the VR sets. I'm so behind technology. It's not really come forward, Thomas. I bought one a few years ago, and I was just, every game felt like it was an inch deep as far as the surface of the water. You played it for like 30 minutes, and you'd kind of done everything there was to do in every individual game. It just didn't have any kind of real initial immersion, but you don't really, it's just not come along very far. Seth says, forgive my ignorance because I don't know a lot when it comes to owners, but would it be beneficial to have Bezos as an owner? Would he upgrade the training facilities, or am I missing the mark on this? No, you're on the point with it. I think the issue that comes in with the Bezos has to do with people and looking at his business practices and not liking Amazon as the conglomerate they are and as this kind of pseudo monopoly. So I think when you see the pushback with Bezos, it really comes down to that than everything else. He's more of a representation a bit, I think, of things that people don't necessarily like in this modern era of the billionaire types like this. But I would maintain that that's not really, to me, germane to the discussion of him as an NFL owner. And what I would mean by that is that I want an NFL owner who's going to open his pocketbook. I want an NFL owner that's going to stay out of the way of the front office and that's going to come in and do what he needs to do at the right time. If there's a call that needs to be made, if there's a guy that needs to be fired, that you're not too jumpy in that realm, that you do it at the right time, at the right place. Like Jody came in with Coach Carroll a couple of years ago and said, okay, we're got to move on. Wasn't necessarily the straightforward, easy move. The straightforward, easy move would have been just to roll with Carroll again in the future years. But instead you said, nope, we're going to make the hard move here. We're going to make the tough decision. So I just want those real specific things for my owner, and then I want him out of the way. Does Bezos have the big pocketbooks? You better believe. When it comes to like talking about the facilities and stuff like that, Seth, it's not really much of a need because Seahawks moved their facilities and training facilities to Renton to that whole new building there that Paul Allen's already built. I mean, this is where Paul Allen, for a lot of whoever is the new owner, has done the work for you. He's built the facilities there. He's got the new stadium in Seattle that was just built 20 years ago. So you get to just kind of come in and, not miss a beat there as an owner when you walk in. I mean, maybe he gets him like a new plane or something. But he does have the pocketbooks. And the reason I do get worried about the pocketbook, of course, is because there's, for some reason, as much as ever in this modern era, we've got a lot of these owners who don't have a lot of money, but want to be owners, but don't have a lot of money to really then build a tangible team to be able to put together to be able to go compete. So it is a thing that you can run into the wrong end of that. I mean, the Mariners are doing this right now with their ownership group, where those guys are practically at times you get the feeling like, on welfare just about, that we're a welfare organization as a baseball team. So I really just want to see that be the thing that drives it. And if I've got to go with a guy who made his billions a little dodgy, who's going to be a great owner, or go for the guy that's a real beacon of the city, but he's butt poor, I'm going to take Bezos. Yeah. HHG COD VR, you die in the game, you die in real life. Or is that I'd rather have Ballmer or Gates or Mark Cuban or Bezos or over Bezos? I don't know about Gates or Cuban to myself on that. I'd have to be out on Gates. And Gates, I don't know about Gates. Ballmer, though, sign me up there, man. Ballmer would be a great owner. He would be fantastic. Hey, Josh, can Emawari cover Kittle and McBride man-to-man? He can. in doing the research, and at the top of the show, I showed a few of these cut-ups of this A.A. Joss, but looking at the research of Kyle Hamilton and how that role was used there for him, you would think going into it with Kyle Hamilton, if you were to look at the Baltimore Raven tape from 2023, that they had used Kyle Hamilton in the role that you're sort of intimating, that you would put him up on those tight end matchups, and then he could just neutralize those guys, lock them down. That's not Mike McDonald's defense, because when you start to move guys into specific parts for specific matchups, you're getting away from the way that the scheme runs. Mainly the confusion, the simulated boxes, the stack pressures, and all that kind of stuff. You're trying to now just kind of play it straight up a little bit. So there's really not as much of that within his defense. Will there be times when Emari is going to be matched up on a Kittle or McBride, and you'll feel that and see that? Yeah. But are you going to have him be the Kittle stopper, the McBride stopper out there? He's not going to run it like that. It's going to be a smattering of snaps you'll see on them, and that snaps will come through the natural, organic way that the scheme runs, not by you sort of putting him out there in alignment on the guy. But that's the part that stood out in looking at Hamilton, that you go and look at, for instance, A.A. Joss walking into the conference championship game 2 years ago against the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs team that doesn't have a lot on the outside of the receiver position that can really get after you. And so then you have a Kelsey there that becomes the number one target, and you go, oh, okay, well, ideally, I would think McDonald coming into this game is going to want to neutralize Kelsey, so he's going to put Hamilton on Kelsey just throughout the whole game, and it'll just be him locking up Kelsey 24/7. But then when you watch the tape, that's not the way that they played that out. So it's not really inherently kind of the way that this particular defense is going to roll, because the defense is much more based on the 11 guys playing together on a string than it is you're going to be doing this, and you're going to be doing that, and the rest of the guys will just be doing the normal stuff. Y2K, thank you for another $5 donation. I appreciate the double dip. Don't know, brother. VR Call of Duty sounds like a good idea until someone who plays VR Call of Duty all the time eats some mushrooms or LSD and goes on a spree. I suppose that is true. They had a couple of years ago where you could be standing in this thing, and then you had like these slippery things on your feet, and you could actually run, and you could have a little like fake gun thing there, and you're running through. And I guess that just didn't really come forward as a methodology of approach they could utilize. But I feel like VR is going to come along here at some point or another. They're going to get this thing mastered somehow or another. Just feels like a matter of time that's kind of the next step when it comes to the video game industry. But you're right, man. Somebody would probably do that. They do the shrooms or the LSD, and they'd go crazy. They'd get stuck in the game. Their consciousness would get stuck in the game. Thomas says, I hope it's Bezos or Ballmer. Ballmer with the Clippers is aggressive like PA. I want an owner who will copy Paul Allen's model. Me too. That's as simple as it comes down to for me, Thomas. I don't have anything picky outside of that. It's like that's as straightforward and down the line of what I want. Exactly the same. Exactly the same way. Yeah, I don't think Ballmer's happening either, Brian. I do mention I'd like to see it, but I agree with you. I just seem to get the impression it's not going to go down there. And boy, Bezos just wants an NFL team so bad. Brian says Bezos gave up on NFL teams when he missed out on the Commanders. I don't know. We'll see on that. I mean, if Seattle becomes available, bro, you might suddenly see him a lot more interested all of a sudden. Ricardo says Mark Cuban would be great considering his track record with the Mavericks. I think he did some really good things as an owner with the Mavericks. Got him a title, that's for sure. I don't like seeing Ricardo, him selling to an owner that then wants to then move the team to Vegas. So, the Mavericks are established in Dallas. That's a hearty fandom. And what kind of happened there with Cuban is he kind of did the same thing Schultz did, where he said, okay, I just want to get my profit. I don't care what happens after I leave here a little bit. And so I would offer that a part alone with me with Cuban would have me out on him there. You made that mistake once, you could make it again. And that's one mistake you just cannot make. You can't sell to a prospective owner that's going to move this franchise. You can't do that once. Once is one time too many doing that. Chad Hart says, thanks for the kind words yesterday. That lifted my spirits. There's Zena on that note. Go Hawks. Yep, she's been making her presence felt a little bit more, man. And it was tough to hear that. You had to kind of go through that with your kitty out there, Chad. Like I was telling you too. I mean, Zena here, she's I think she's probably getting close to her 20s now. I don't know if when I got her, she was full grown, and I've had her for years and years. But I'm not looking forward to the day. I'm not looking forward to the day coming up on that one. And I know how much it's going to wreck me. So hang in there, man. Hang in there. And like I always like to think that they're always kind of still walking with you too, that they're always still kind of around you a little bit here and there in some way or another. Gilbrey says, realistically, we need to think tier 2 billionaires. Bezos won't buy, I think. Ballmer, doubt it. Loves the clips. Gates, doubt he cares. Yep, probably so. Brian says, most likely a scenario for new owner is a consortium of billionaire with a head man or a private equity firm. I could see it. And we do know Jody wants to try to buy back in on the Seahawks when they sell. So maybe she's a part of that too. Just as long as they're got enough cash-rich stuff going on. That says, imagine getting teabagged in VR Call of Duty. Yeah, I wouldn't like that. They got the whole thing now in Call of Duty where you can grab the guy and if you catch him from behind, you can pull him in and then hold the gun to his head. And you got all these sickos online that take you into the bedroom and then start squatting and standing next to the bed, simulating something, which I dare not say. It gets brutal. The trolling in the new age has gotten very brutal. Young Bido Game, thank you for that, man. Says Brandon Kane's the man. Appreciate you for that, brother. Kind of easy to say, man. Thomas, anyone can believe Mavs got the number 1 pick. Oh, I know. It got so dirty with that, Thomas, too. And boy, the NBA, you talk about, there is no doubt in my mind at this point that the lotto in the NBA is absolutely fixed. From Patrick Ewing going to the Knicks to LeBron going to the Cavs. It's pretty funny to see how much they're pretty overt about it, quite frankly. But yeah, then the Mavericks suddenly end up with the number 1 overall pick after making that brain dead trade, which we all thought at the moment in the time was like, does the NBA force this trade to happen? Are they trying to get Luka into LA and Brian, you have yourself a great weekend too, man. Appreciate you. King Bomber says, I think the most realistic outcome is that Jody is a part of the team that purchases the Hawks and that she's in charge for the foreseeable future. I could see it go down that way, King Bomber. I think she's trying to get a big part of the team, and we don't know how her monetary situation is going to play out when it's all said and done and they've liquidated all of the assets from the trust. That's going to be kind of the key on this, is how that kind of sets out with that. It's the uncertainty here, but we know that it has been said she wants to try to get in on it. Thomas says, I'm sorry, NBA owner are far more loyal to the dollar, not to the fan base. If they were Seattle, would still have its franchise and be battling for an NBA championship. Amen, Thomas. Amen. I think that the NBA owners and the NBA process and what they've done with that league and that sport has been ridiculous, and that we've heard that they're down maybe 50% as far as their viewership goes, and I'm not surprised. It's the same thing as like fixing this lotto system there. It's like an NBA was one of the big forerunners of having, remember, it's like, wasn't an NFL referee that got popped by the feds. It wasn't a baseball umpire that got popped by the feds. It was an NBA official that got popped by the feds. So you talk about fixing games and how they do it. And if it the NBA's got a lot of black marks on them right now where they've earned having their viewership go down like they have. I think there's a lot of things they could do to really bump things up if they were more concentrated on trying to grow the sport rather than just, they're trying to have 4 teams that only matter every year almost, I feel like. Dune Moose, is that a construction vehicle being on your end? I keep checking my environment. Yes, it is. I try to get my mic turned down a little bit as I can, but unfortunately, we've had next door monster construction start up. So I'm in the position now of trying to, I'm renting this place here, and I'm trying to talk the landlord in and now, we got to move because it's too loud and it's not stopping over there anytime soon. But yeah, it's me. Grass, would you rather have an owner or an ownership group? I'd rather an owner. I think when you get too many fingers in the pie, you don't get enough of a certain direction in where you're going. I don't know a lot of conglomerate ownership groups that have had a lot of success run by a committee. Go look at Chicago, for instance. There's a whole crew of them that make up that ownership committee. I think that's a big reason why you see that group not have a lot of money to spend, not have a real certain direction of how you feel where they're going as an NFL franchise at times. So it's I think the data on this is pretty pretty clear. It's better to have a single owner. That's the ideal. I would not be for an NBA draft lottery, Thomas, for the same reason I don't like adding extra rules in the NFL. Adding extra subjective rules in the NFL. It just gives them more opportunities to fix the books, to mess with the results. So I don't understand it either on that. The NBA's got this lotto system, but the NBA's got the biggest problem with tanking of any of the major sports. But they've got the lotto system, which is supposed to get ahead of you not having to deal with tanking. Right? So it's one where I just don't think it's smart. I don't understand why you want to penalize the bad teams in that way. Every team in the NFL is trying to win. Every team in the NFL is trying to do what they can do. Nobody wants to end up with the number one overall pick, even in this upcoming draft with a guy like Arch Manning. You'll still see teams who are the teams that are really tanking this year that we see right now. So no, I wouldn't want to see it. Nah. King says, which is why I think this is the most realistic sense that she wants the team. Look how I handled this. I'm a fit to be the owner. Yeah, I think she wants to own it too, King. And I think you're right about her taking the extra time. I've said every time you take an extra couple of years on this, you're adding to the value of the ball club and what they can sell for. Then what the ball club sells for, you get more of the return on the profit so that then you can buy that ball club back, So she's kind of adding on to her bank account a little bit here to then buy a bigger piece of the team as you get down the line. Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $20 donation. Kevin, that is very kind of you, man. I thank you for that. If you could smoke a blunt with any current Hawk and pick his brain for a 2-hour session, who would it be? You and Dago? You been to Thrusters? Hawk Bar and PB? Be dope if you did a live show on there. It's literally Hawk's Nest. Oh, let's go, man. Unfortunately, Kevin, the way it's worked since I've gotten down in San Diego is I work 100-hour weeks on this channel. And with that means that when my days are done, I'm pretty exhausted by that point. I don't have much left in the tank. So when you talk about, okay, go drive 45 minutes to this bar, go out over here, go hang out over here, get down over here, I'm pretty much wiped. I'm pretty much like, I get to this weekend here after doing weekly shows and prepping up for next week's shows, and it's really just kind of relaxing. So some of this is, Kevin, just I'm getting older. The energy level ain't the same as when I was young to run around and go from left to right, but where you just bump. Sometimes you're just like, okay, I need to kind of rest and recoup here a little bit to get on the other side of it. As far as any current Hawk, I pick his brain for a 2-hour session. It's a good question. Let me think about it here. Man. It's a good question. I don't know if I've got a guy that stands out more than one to the other for me on this one, to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't know if there's a guy, Kevin, for, right now, I don't know. I think I'd be much more interested in talking to, one of the guys off the Legion of Boom defense or something like that. Be able to talk to like a Cam Chancellor or a Bobby Wagner. I think I would just have way more questions for those guys in regards to history of past. Guys right now, like, what am I going to ask Julian Love about? Like, tell me about the defense, like, it would be kind of interesting on that, but I think there'd be more interesting, intricate questions I could get to some of the guys in the former player role, especially through those Legion of Boom teams, and ask them some questions about some things that are outstanding that I'd want to know about. More than any current guy. Just don't have anybody that jumps out to me, kind of currently that, everybody would be kind of, it'd be cool to talk to a Kenneth Walker, it'd be cool to talk to a Reek Woolen, it'd be cool to talk to an Abraham Lucas, and pick his brain a little bit about different schemes, where his knees at, all that other kind of stuff there, Those guys, but they'd all be kind of equally about the same guys I'd want. Whereas like, I definitely would love to talk to a Cam, definitely be a few different guys off that defense back in the day I would certainly love to speak to. Marshawn Lynch would be fun to be able to chop it up with him. Even a Michael Robinson with his familiarity with the team and kind of being able with his past and being able to get, just any of those guys, I think there'd be about 30 questions I'd have that I'd want to put to them, Kevin, and be like, what about this? Well, this thing happened with that, but what was the, on that side. So I'm going to try this summer to get out if I can, out and about into San Diego. But I will tell you, Kevin, it has been just really tough where there's just not a lot of energy left over right now. And I'm getting definitely older, I can feel things wind down as far as, you used to be able to have the go-go engine all the time. And then now you just kind of go, okay, I'm gonna just kind of relax and kick the feet up and call it a day on this one. I'm taking naps now, Kevin. It's awful. It's horrible getting old. I'll tell you that. It's horrible getting old. But it's a great idea. I'd love to be able to do a show out in the bar at some point, be it a casino up in Seattle or kind of somewhere else if I could kind of figure it out. There is a place here that I think I could maybe figure out something to do a show from. But that's just kind of right down the road for me. I've been thinking about asking them, and they're pretty friendly. I think they'd be willing to let me do it, but I got to figure out the time and the place and how to pull it off and kind of all that too. Because sometimes those bars, Kevin, you got to do it off the Wi-Fi, and Wi-Fi is not enough that can keep the consistent signal there to be able to push it out. You got to be hardlined in to connect on this stuff. Most of the time, some of the places have good enough Wi-Fi, you can get it done, but it's also depends on how many people are on the network and how it goes with that. So I've been really bad about getting out and kind of doing much exploring since I've been here last year. It's been just put the head down, grind, go, but not in a bad way. I don't mind grinding. I just don't have anything left over at the end. I'm done. But thank you, Kevin, for the $20 donation. Definitely going to look at more of a former guy than a current guy, I would say. I'd be looking at somebody that was on that Legion of Boom team. Any number of those defenders I'd love to have a chance to speak with and chop it up with them. Of course, I'd love to be able to have a chance to eventually someday talk to Largent. That'd be cool too, Kevin. But everybody right now is kind of still, they're so young and still kind of early part of their career, where they haven't quite seen enough to talk about a little bit. I don't know if I'd have as much to chop it up with them on. Dune says, Adam Silver and his Chromies thought we can make a ton of cash by sending Luka to LA. We'll offer Nico a number one pick to do that. That's how it seems in retrospect, Dune. I don't know how it's not that. The Mavs had like a 1% chance of getting the number one pick. It just doesn't, it's that thing people will tell you where it's like, you see stuff that doesn't add up and then people go, well, no, it just played out that way. No, it didn't. This was manipulated and it's pretty obviously so. I think the NBA is getting a little bit desperate right now, and that's why they're willing to make this so overt. You lose 50% of your viewership in a year, you're going to start to do some pretty extreme things and not worry about the blowback from those extreme things because you're already losing viewership as it is. So what's the difference? Thomas says Nico's very lucky because he got the number one pick. Dallas fans wanted to lynch him. I still can't believe Luka's a Laker. It wasn't like the sack situation. Luka wanted to stay in Dallas. Yeah. And I don't think they got lucky getting the number one pick there. I think they got given the pick. And the NBA has done this in years past, Oh, how lucky is it that LeBron James gets to go to Cleveland and the home state he was born in with the number one overall pick? Wow, that's so lucky. Generational player. Patrick Ewing back in the day of the Knicks. Georgetown player. New York player going to New York. NBA's done this before. They have definitely done this before, and they're doing it again, and they've gotten away with it. Maybe they'll get away with it here. But I'll tell you, it doesn't help the authenticity of your sport or the things are above board when you're doing that. Especially when you have a sport like the NBA where it's all about the top end guys. It's all about those top end teams. And it's Lakers, it's Knicks, San Antonio in there, and then you have all the also rans there that are basically just there, just happy to be there kind of organizations. Kevin says the single owner is becoming more rare with these billion-dollar acquisitions. You're only talking about a dozen or so people that could be interested in an NFL franchise. Very true, Kevin. Yeah. let alone loyal to Seattle. Yeah, I agree. I think the big part, especially when you look at the NFL that's made this tough, Kevin, is the escrow situation, where you sign a player to a $300 million contract, you're going to have to stick about $150 million to $200 million into escrow immediately. How many guys just have hundreds of millions sitting around that they can just go kick that into? So this is going to lead to more of the conglomerate of ownership groups, but you better have a singular voice thing. You better have somebody there then that's, carrying the day as far as able to guide the thing, and that there's not too many cooks in the kitchen, not too many chiefs, not enough Indians kind of thing. And that's where I worry about that a little bit. But this could just be where it's going, to your point on that, in the long term anyway, HHG, thank you for 21 months as a Hawks Nest member. I appreciate you that, almost 2 years. Start a GoFundMe to buy the Hawks. Boy, that'd have to be the best GoFundMe of all time to get up there for that one, my man. And then if I got to return the funds, if we made all the funds, that'd be tough. That'd be cool if we could just get the whole Pacific Northwest region to kick in. I'll try. I'll give it a try. We'll give it a shot, HHG. I don't think we're going to get very far with it. Thomas, I'm sick and tired of NFL teams trying to tank for players like Manning, Burrow a couple years back. It's not fair to teams like Seahawks to try to win. Yeah, I don't think it's as bad a problem, Thomas, as other sports like basketball, where it's just an epidemic of an issue, but you don't like to see it, that's for sure. Neil says, let Pumpkin cook with a big cat. Pumpkin must have heard you, man. She jumped right up here. Thomas, I wouldn't be so shocked if a player like Russell Wilson tried to buy the Seahawks, kind of like Griffey did with the Mariners. I could see it. And Russell has said that he wants to be an owner of an NFL organization at some point. Probably going to have the money with how much he's made as a pro. Sean's most underrated player at the Legion of Boom was Maxwell. He was a really good corner for us. Yeah. Guy had some very good ball skills back there as a cornerback. That's a good pick. I don't know if there's another guy, better. I might say Sean, Chris Clemens might be in there for me a little bit too. But Maxwell is pretty good. Thomas says, for Kevin, JSN would be Ernest Jones, Byron Murphy. Those are good picks. I wouldn't mind talking with them, chopping it up with them. Brian, he says, tell me about, there are fun parts about getting older, but the energy to put into what amounts to work just isn't there anymore. Oh, it's awful. And I hate it as I'm a guy that likes to be go, 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 Brian, I like to just keep the engine rolling at all times. And I've had, even in recent years, working on the channel where I'm, knee deep in working on something, and just the energy is just pittering away all of a sudden. And, I'm living on coffee and doing all that and try to stay in good shape and do all the things to keep things going. But man, when they say father time is undefeated, it's not just about football players, baseball players, basketball players in the court. It is undefeated when it comes to real life. And folks, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, enjoy the energy level. Because once you start to get past that point into the elder age, that thing your meter just naturally starts to dip down. And it drives you crazy because you want to be sometimes more active, but you just can't. You can't deny the need for that nap from time to time. Femi says, I'm telling you guys, if we still had a team, the NBA would have viewership guys. I think that it's partly a bit of the issue on top of a lot of different issues with the NBA right now. One of the issues is that you see a team like Seattle ripped away for a team like Oklahoma City. You've seen a variety of different teams bounce around in the NBA where they've struggled to maintain a stop at times. Vancouver, right? So this has been an issue for them, and I think that when NBA fans see you tear it away from Seattle to move to Oklahoma City, and not like Seattle had done anything to deserve that. A team that had won a championship in Seattle, a team that had success, a team with a rich history, and you tear them away like that. I don't think that it does your sport well. I don't think that that's a good look for you. Bloody Grimoire, Russ is made out like a band in the NFL. Haha. Yeah, he has. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And, if he invested that properly, maybe he'll have the money to buy himself a nice little piece. When's the next call-in show, says Thomas? We'll probably not do this Sunday. We'll do next Sunday, Thomas. Let's shoot for that. So we'll go Sunday, 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Not this Sunday, but next Sunday around the 30th. We'll lock it in. Spaces, which cat would win in a fight? Pumpkin. She is ferocious. She is mean. She is the bully of these two. Her move is to get up behind Xena, grab her around the back, and then just pull her to the ground. And then Xena does this move where she's kind of flailing around as the other one's on her back, just holding her in place. So she's definitely a bully. She's a live wire at times, folks. I can't control her. I can't. That's orange cat life right there. That's orange cat living. You know what I mean? Nothing you can do about it when it comes to that. Yeah, I think Russ's wife might not want to come back in the Seattle HHG. You're right about that. She might be more like, let's buy a piece of New York Giants. How about that? Or maybe the Jets. You know? Toronto Raptors. Yeah, the Raptors had that one run there, you know, where they went all in and like the risk that they had to take going with Kawhi for that 1 year with his injury history and hoping that they could and they did it. They pulled it off. But that's definitely the exception to the rule on that. And it's very hard to make it go that way. And you really are the teams that have the players and the teams that are kind of the also-rans. And the part about NBA is you got about 17, 18, 19 of the teams, you know, walking in the season are going to be bad. It's hard to have a sport where there's that lack of parity and then you're going to still keep the fan bases engaged. There's other things, though. There's no simple explanation for the NBA's downfall where you say, well, it's the Seahawks. Sonics got moved, and so NBA, everybody started checking out that point. No, it's like, there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of the way the physicality's been drained out of the game. There's the official getting popped by the feds, and now people are wondering about how much of it's legitimized to the, you know, every year you have teams that you know aren't going to compete, to the development. It's everything all the way around. The NBA is kind of messed up a little bit in certain respects of things. Thomas says Orange Cats always go crazy. They do. It's just it's inherently part of their nature. There's nothing you can do about it. It's the way of the ginger cat. God built them with a little bit more spice. More loving spice, more feisty spice. They just give you a little bit more. Tom says, cool, close to my B-day. Shoot, I'm old. I'm getting up there too, man. I'm feeling it. Yeah. Father Time he is unwavering. There's days I have because I'm out in San Diego. It's just like, I'm going to go to the beach today. You get to 1 o'clock and you're like, do I really? Do I really want to get a beach? Yeah. I could just kind of just chill. Patrick says, did you see Tom Grossi in the draft? Inspirational. I didn't, no. But Tom does great work. Does great work, man. He's been kicking ass. Dude, I'd be interested in a good interview with Leslie Frazier towards the end of training camp. Get his perspective going in the season. I'll try to reach out, Dune. Those guys are hard to bring into the ranks at times. I've had a hell of a time trying to get guys in on interviews. They're very elusive. Very elusive. But I'll give it a shot. Give it a try. Thomas says, I wish OKC never uses supersonic history since when they won a championship in 1979. I'm happy Peyton Kemp won't retire their jersey in OKC. Yeah, it's ridiculous that they took our whole lineage with them. I've never heard of anything like that, quite frankly, and it's just another slap in the face to Seattle fans, quite frankly. It's Clay Bennett basically pissing in our face on top of stealing our team. You just talk about insult to injury on top of it. Like, oh, you're going to take our history with you too? Like, come on. Yeah, Sean, I'm in the same point, Sean. And you hit that spot, you hit that age marker of it, and there's no getting around it. You ain't going to juice your way back to your youth on that one. You know what I mean? There's that one guy that's like living off of his son's blood now. He like injects his son's blood into him to try to maintain his youth, which is weird. That's really weird. Tom says, laughing out loud, I know the feeling, especially starting work at 3:30 a.m. Yeah, it's tough for me. So I tend to be a guy that likes to just go. I don't like that just sit around and, just relax and do nothing. I tend to have a brain that wants to kind of keep things rolling, Neil says, anyone else here older than the Hawks? Let's go, Neil. Let's go. Brian says, all right, I'm going to bounce. Good seeing everyone. Go Hawks. Well, we will, let's wrap it up here up on that note of things here. and put a little bit of a button on this one. We had another great week of shows today. I really thank you guys for rolling with me on this new content and being flexible as we've kind of changed some things up here just a little bit at the Hawks Nest. We're going to continue to go through this off season with these shows. We got some shows lined up for you guys next week as well. So we're going to be looking at up on Monday. We're going to be going into the UDFA class. A couple of guys specifically that I really want to lock in and target in on. We do this every year, and I have a pretty good track record of saying, hey, these are the guys you guys want to be paying attention to. Here's the guys likely make the roster. Last year, George Holani was the guy that jumped out that was going to be the guy that I said, hey, he'll be your fourth running back. Look at what this guy's got to bring. So we got the UDFAs coming in on Monday. Then we're going to look at some of the year one trends of Mike Macdonald's defense. Where is he taking this defense from where they were? What is it that they did good with him under year one that was a change from prior years? How did they get that improvement? We're going to be looking in pretty heavily into some numbers, a little bit of some tape, not doing a big tape dive there on Monday. And then we've got a load of shows set up for you for next week as well. So we're going to keep this thing rolling through this off season. I thank you guys for watching today. If you can, hit that like button. You know, it helps me out, shows up on the algorithm, gets people to notice the channel and get them on subbed up. A couple of other notes as well. I'll get the link in the description section below here, but we're having an event meetup with the Roundtable Sports folks. So they're setting everything up to have all of us that are the Roundtable contributors to meet up down in LA. I think it's October 4th. I'm going to put the description in the link in the description where you can get yourself signed up if you want to. I know it's not a Seahawks game. It's going to be the Niners against the Rams on Thursday night, but we're going to be meeting up there with a crew of folks. We're going to be tailgating. We're going to be doing a night before a meetup at the bar. They're going to be watching the game in person in the stadium. So for $300, you get access to that the prior night there in the bar. You get we'll be all hanging out prior to the game. We're going to be going and sitting down in the seats at the game and all of that. So it's pretty good bang for the buck for the $300 ticket, especially that stadium, which is very expensive, those tickets in that stadium. But I'm going to be getting that link down to you guys there. If you guys want to jump, again, I know everybody's up in Seattle, so it's a bit of a travel to get down to LA Thursday, middle of the week and whatnot on that. But we've had a lot of people already sign up for it here, expecting a really good turnout, and I'm really looking forward to being able to go meet those guys in person as we've been doing this for a year and have a lot of fun with that. So rolling along there. And then just as a final note as well, we are now on the Believe Network. So I signed up an agreement with them where all of the podcast episodes we got pumped through still on my normal areas, but you can now find specifically audio versions of this podcast over on the Believe Network, as I'll be putting those over on that side of it as well. So Hawks Nest, just keeping the momentum going, keeping things rolling, keeping things hot. And I appreciate you guys rolling with me, rocking with me in that way. Thank you to everybody that dropped donos and being members of the channel, HHG, Kevin Mullen, Y2K. Appreciate you guys for all the donations on that. Feed me. You guys are awesome as ever on that support. And I really, really do appreciate it. We'll be back on Monday, and then we'll do next Sunday call-in show. So Monday through Friday, we'll have some shows set up. And then on Sunday, we'll do the call-in show again here for members of the channel, patrons of the channel. I thank you guys for all of your support this off season. I really appreciate you watching. Hit that like button if you guys get a chance. We will be back in just a mere 48 hours to do some more looking at this UDFA class. We're almost through this draft class. Just got some UDFAs to pick through here to kind of finish the process off. So join me for that show. Back soon. But until that time, don't you dare forget. Don't you do it. I see a few of you back there. You're caught up in the Mariners. You're forgetting about the Hawks here. Don't you do it. We got a defense that's getting ready to do some special things. We got Mike Macdonald, the defensive mastermind, who's finally going to get the opportunity to unleash his defense in full in 2025. And it's going to be a wondrous sight at that. So prepare yourselves. And you better not forget, don't you do it. Go Hawks.